You're listening to Well, I Laughed, Part 2 of Friend or Foe, Open Waters, Open Questions. Hello.
That looks good.
I think so. Who's to say? Not me. I don't know where I am. A week off and suddenly I don't remember how to do anything.
A week off from what? You still have a job. You
week
still
off
have
from
a job,
this
right?
Job. This other job that we gave ourselves.
Good. I can't wait to watch us on air work through our codependency. I was gone for a week, friends. Hi, I'm glad to be back.
It was so bad that he called me while I was at PT and was like, it's not actually an emergency, which is what I thought and why I answered. Because he's on vacation.
In your defense, it was the first time in 4.5 days that you had heard anything from me at all.
Yeah.
I was shocked you would answer while at PT, though, because I heard you in physical pain. Part of me was going to be like, it's not an emergency for me, but is it an emergency for you? Where are you right now?
I was on the bike warming up, so like no one was actually paying attention to me, so I was like, why not? And
it
was stupid.
This is excellent. If you are ever murdering someone and someone calls you, just be like, sorry, I'm at PT right now. Can I call you back?
I'm at a workout. Also, don't answer your phone while you're murdering someone.
I feel like we're kind of getting into semantics now.
Okay.
So let's talk real quick, half a second, fun little story time around vacation with my family.
Yeah.
So I and Maya, we live in a beautiful big city with an international airport that flies nonstop to essentially anywhere we want to go to.
This is true.
And I forget what it's like when you don't live in a city with that as an option. My parents, and I think by extension, anyone who lives like in the countryside or a medium or small sized town, they go through a Tolkien-esque style, like the Hobbit journey to go on vacation, whereas you and I like Uber to the plane
airport,
factory and then just kind of manifest wherever we're trying to go.
Yep.
My poor parents had to go pick one of my siblings up and then drive to the Omaha airport, which is over an hour away, and then got on that plane to fly to, I think their connector was in Salt Lake City, and then from Salt Lake City fly into San Francisco where we were vacationing, and both flights were essentially the same amount of time as my one non-stop direct Denver to San Francisco flight is. And like, because it's one of the only 2 flights, out of Omaha that day. There's more than one, don't come for me. But, because this is one of the few flights, it's like packed with people. Meanwhile, on both of my flights, they're like, not a full flight, feel free to stretch out.
Yeah, you texted me and were like, no one in the middle seat.
Life has meaning again. And so I'm showing up, I'm like, oh, hey guys, sorry, I'm just like finishing up a book on tape. Meanwhile, my dad's beard has grown and is gray. And my brother, now a full-grown man, ready to go to war. No, he's in his late 20s. He's already able to do that. But no, it was a lot of fun. It was great to see them. And it was funny when I arrived and everyone's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And it's always great because you like jump into the stream of a circus that at that point has been happening for hours, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Act 1, parents and my sister and her boyfriend. Act 2, them meeting my brother and sister-in-law at the airport. Then there's a whole layover in Salt Lake City I'm not there for. I'm a main character getting introduced halfway through the series. That's episode 6 or 7 if we're on Netflix, okay? And I'm like, what up, folks? And it's just a whole thing already. On the plane train to go from the terminal
train.
To go from the terminal to the, I think that's actually what they call it in San Francisco. At one point, I had to look over at my sister who's seated, and I go, oh, sis, watch out real quick. Your purse sandwich is about to fall out. Because my sister had gotten a sandwich in Salt Lake City, couldn't finish all of it, and now I'd like save for later. Which, that's actually terrible news for me because it means they'd eaten more recently and thus weren't interested in getting a snack right away. So
should have brought me. That's all I'm saying.
Why, so we could not talk to each other for 3 hours on that plane?
And get snacks.
Do you know what's so good about vacation is I just reread a book that I've already read. I'm like, I don't need to be serious. I don't need to be an intellectual.
Nothing's real.
I don't need like my little lamp, my little like I like to think I don't have any sleep anxiety, but
That's
then
a
it's
lie.
like my entire house needs to be the perfect temperature. I have a lamp, no overhead light, like a book that I read, a candle lit just out of arm's reach, so I have to get up and like blow it out. And then every now and then, if it's been an especially busy or anxious week, just like a little sleep story from the Calm app. But I can fall asleep anywhere.
It's really true. It's really, really unfortunate. There was one time when we were in Munich, though, and I fell asleep beautifully, early, and mostly sober after Oktoberfest, and it had started raining, and I had left the little window open because it's like it's just like kind of went up and we only got rained on a little bit, but it was just like so peaceful. And so I turned on a little story on the like whatever app I was listening to. It was Headspace, and Grant, when he comes in, I think he like tried to like touch the bed to see if I was getting rained on, and we're like, you know what? Never mind.
I did something.
Oh, you did?
So the roof, we were staying on like the top floor, so the ceiling was angled
really slanted
because we were in the roof. So that means when the window opened, it didn't go up and down. It like kind of angled out more at a 45-degree angle. So the rain was actively getting on your comforter, and so you're asleep and I'm like right next to your head like feeling, and I'm like dragging your lederhosen or whatever you call the lady version out of the way, and I'm like closing the window a little bit more, and I'm like, sweet dreams. I'm like, now that won't wake her up, let me go ahead and tuck myself in the
have an alarm.
Exactly.
I think you remembered, or you heard the like train sound from my sleep story, and you were like, "Oh, she's having a good night."
Oh no, it was very nice to walk in.
Yeah.
At least I believe so. You know, a lot of those details.
It was
got
nice
filled in.
until he started snoring. Yeah.
But then when you woke up, you were dry, and now you could take care of me.
Honestly, I was the number of times I went over and like kind of closed that window and was like opening it and then moved a little bit of my clothes out of the way or something like that just to make sure it got like, I was like, if I get wet, you know what, it's fine.
Meanwhile, I'm like, in 48 hours, we are going to be on a 10-hour flight, and this whole bag is going to smell like mildew if we don't do something. Speaking of taking care of you, I know you are currently in the process of potentially house hunting.
Yes.
And that's so exciting. What I am most excited for you to get, a lot of people think it's my own private studio. And of course, I am excited about that. What I'm more excited for you to get is the epitome of upper middle class wealth, and that is a garage fridge. I am so excited for you to have a garage fridge. Also, because every time I go into your only fridge right now, immense anxiety.
We need a
so
garage
much stuff
freezer
in
is what we need.
No. That's a basement deep freezer.
That's fair,
that mainly holds the half a cow your family buys every year, and then like 8 Tombstone pizzas and your nephew's fundraising cookie dough or whatever that the family's been secretly chiseling away whenever they want a little snack.
And no one's
for
telling
a year.
anyone else about it.
This is a biography now. A garage fridge is totally different. A garage fridge is to host the 24 cans of Diet Coke you either A, will go through in 1 week, or B, bought 6 years ago for a kid's graduation party from high school, and no one drinks Diet Coke. Those are the 2 states of Diet Coke.
Anyway,
I won't be shamed.
No, I get it. I'm most excited for the basement freezer. You're right. That is where that belongs. But Casey buys an insane amount of Costco frozen goods, which is good for us.
Yes.
For like when we like forget to cook or whatever, and there's like already like pre-chopped chicken that we can just like throw directly into a pan, whatever. It's super nice, but we don't have a big freezer.
Right, not exceptional right now for ice making.
No.
In fact, ice freezes a lot faster at my house because it can fully circulate around the ice maker. Meanwhile, here it's like...
It also doesn't help that we make the ice on the side that it opens.
No,
if
it doesn't. Nothing about your freezer is good.
I'm not actually convinced that the freezer ever fully closes whenever Casey goes to the grocery store.
This is... Yes, I have seen that. And that's why I said anxiety. But this is also maybe a great question for you, an engineer. When you go downstairs to the basement and it's already a little cold, and then you open up the deep freezer and you get that smell from the deep freezer, but it's like almost sweet and it smells good. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What is that?
Not
is
anything
it antifreeze?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
I imagine it's a chemical or some kind of...
I just remember cracking it open, and it's not like a smell you'd want to eat.
No.
You know, a lot like rosemary. But it is, you're like... That smells nice.
Yeah, no, I get that. It can't be anything
I
good.
really hope that that's a universal experience and not just like a weird thing. It's like when gasoline smells good. You're like, I don't want to drink it, but I understand. Do you know, actually, gasoline doesn't smell anymore. Because I'm pretty sure they took out all the lead.
You know what smell always used to get me? You know, like the brown paper towels, the like really shitty ones?
Yeah, like gas station bathroom ones.
Yeah, and then that wet. I don't know why that smell always gets me. Yeah,
No,
I
think
why.
I know what it is.
What?
In elementary school, that is what they froze in the nurse's office, and you would have it close to your face. And so you're used to smelling it like wet when it makes its scent.
Interesting.
I know.
I ever told you when I accidentally ate a candle?
No, you didn't. I have yet to hear this story.
Okay, do you have any other updates?
I mean, I think we're going to kind of focus in on this one, and then I'll let you know during, throughout, and at the end if I have anything else to say. Before I get into my candle eating, did you want to say something? What, and just keep them all waiting? Any story I tell right now would be fast-forwarded through.
I just have...
Social security number.
I have
No,
so
I'm kidding.
many pages of notes to get through today. I just wanted to consolidate.
Well, then
our
I want
catch-up
you
time.
to give the chance to go ahead and tell this story, and I'm excited personally. Watch you then segue it into whatever story you're about to tell me.
Okay. So this happened. This is one of my very
I'm
first
sorry, I do
memories.
have a story.
Fuck off.
I'm kidding. You knew I wasn't going to let you get started.
I know now. I always forget. There's so much hope in my heart,
I want you to know too. I actually do have a story, but I do think it's better as a Patreon story, and so I'm going to put it in my notes. And then I don't know why you've stopped. You should go your story.
Okay. This is one of my earliest memories. I was at some sort of like, not trade show, but like, you know, like a craft expo or something.
Sure.
They have all the different stalls, or like an art show or something, but it was indoors. And I was this was back when I could speak Japanese, right? So it was when I was pretty little, and I had a really close friend when I was young named Nagi. And she was the daughter, who was my age, of my mom's good friend at the time and her husband. And so me and Nagi would always hang out. And so my parents were off doing something else. I was with Nagi and her dad. And her dad had bought something. And her dad kind of gave it to me, or gave it to Nagi, and said something in Japanese, so I don't remember exactly what it was.
Amazing.
But it was something like, I think he said oishii desu, and which means like good, that like, it tastes good, is good, smells good, something like that. Yeah. And she was like, like, hi. And then she hands it to me to smell. I heard oishi. Oishi, you will say after eating something too, and say, like oishi. And so I took a bite out of it. And I remember so vividly, for this being such an early memory, just panning over, realizing the texture was weird. And both Nagi and her dad are like jaw on the ground.
Because now you have to pay for the candle you've eaten.
I was so young, but they were like, what the hell?
Your child needs help. Yeah. It's like when I was at your fall party a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Was it right? It was right before the podcast began.
It was September.
We were still courting each other.
We were still courting each other.
You brought me over, and I thought you had a beautiful pumpkin dip out on the board. And it was during that time when everyone was doing butter boards, and you had, as I found out with my first bite, created a beautiful butter board, but that I had taken way too much butter. I had taken a generous amount if it was a coconut dip, a pumpkin dip.
Or like a hummus.
Right, had taken far too much for butter.
I remember you put it in your mouth. You were like, what is this?
Okay, so I'm not really hungry anymore between that Uber right here and now this mouthful of butter that I have. All right, so I'm trying not to interrupt you, and you have like warned me at how long this episode might be.
This episode's gonna be really long.
I came here almost an hour early, almost being a hugely important word there.
Almost an hour
It's
early.
already 7.
I kept checking. I was like finishing up my notes, and I kept checking your location to see if I should start setting up. And every time I was like, well, I'm good.
It was like, this needs to get done, that needs to get done.
Yeah.
Maybe we lay down for 5 minutes because it's already been quite a day. Anyways, I'm excited to learn,
Yes.
as always.
So today's episode is Friend or Foe.
Right.
And I will explain how I got to Friend or Foe.
Good.
when we get through the story.
Because mine was obvious and inherent, so...
Oh, this one is very obvious.
Okay.
You just won't know it right off the bat. At least I don't think you will, because...
It's crazy watching you use your iPad as it's plugged in. It's like someone holding an apple still on the tree.
Yeah,
I just want you to like...
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
I will do that at some point when it charges
When
more.
charges
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Say your words to me, Maya. Say your words to me.
So, today's story, this little intro part, has nothing to do with the regular story.
What did
We're
Abraham
not going to
Lincoln?
end up in an Abraham Lincoln situation again. But November 12th, 1993.
Okay.
Look at that. We've got out of the Gilded Age.
But we are in the 90s, which is exactly when my story took place.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. The New York Times publishes an article. It's on page 20. So, but the headline is, Court Invalidates a Decade of Blood Test Results in Criminal Cases.
Okay.
What had happened is a man named Fred Zane, who was a police serologist in West Virginia, had just been found to have lied, made up, or manipulated evidence to win convictions in every one of his cases.
Oh, shit.
Fred had served from 1979 to 1989, and during that time, it was also found that his supervisors had ignored and concealed complaints of his misconduct. Due to this, at least 134 prisoners would be entitled, or could be entitled, to new hearings. Most of these cases were sexual in nature, so most of them were sexual assaults.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there was not a good record of exactly what cases Fred had testified on, so corrections officers just had to hand out forms to inmates saying, do you think you need a new hearing?
No, surely there's court records of the proceedings. They just didn't want to go through them?
I mean, he served in from 79 to 89, so they might have said police serologist instead of Fred Zane or something like that.
I see, okay.
But I also just think it's hilarious that the corrections officers were literally like, if you or a loved one has mesothelioma, you may be entitled to compensation. Do you think this man
Do you
testified?
think your constitutional rights were violated?
Let us know.
Exactly.
And so if they said yes, if their case had DNA evidence in it, their DNA would be retested. If it found out that the DNA was a conclusive match, then nothing would happen. If it didn't match, or whatever case that would result in them being innocent versus guilty, if they would be innocent based off of the DNA alone, then the court would reevaluate the case and see if it could be presumed that they would be innocent if Fred had not testified.
Okay.
So basically they're having to reevaluate.
So it's not
a
an
ton
immediate
of stuff.
get out of jail free card.
No.
But
It's
opens the door.
It opens the door. Yeah, it's like an appeal process. So how do you think Fred was caught? Well, Fred worked on a case in 1987 where a man, Glendale Woodall, was charged with...
Sorry, is that a town or a man?
Man.
Glendale Woodall?
So I saw
Welcome to the town of Glendale Woodall. No minorities, no gays.
So at first I thought there's one
It's
source...
a Romney 80 district, but only a Trump 15.
There was a couple sources that listed him as Glenn Woodall, some that listed him as Glenn, middle name Dale Woodall, and another source that listed him as Glendale Woodall. Don't know what his name is.
Woodall. Town in Arizona, Woodall.
Yeah. I was like, can you guys not get this shit straight? Anyway,
So Glenn.
Yes, a little serious note. He was charged with 2 rapes.
Okay.
Around that time, he was... Fred was on the case in 87, so do the math of when he was convicted versus when those happened. They resulted in a 335-year sentence for Glenn. The West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals overturned this in 88 when the DNA from the cars of the women that had been sexually assaulted was tested, and it proved that Glenn could not have been the perpetrator. He was convicted despite a rock-solid alibi. Testifying in court. And so because of the DNA evidence...
So this guy was like, it's his, scientifically, couldn't be anyone else's, it's his. And someone was like, I was with him
the
in
entire
New York.
time.
Okay.
Yes. And so he was convicted regardless.
Wow.
And so... and it's also to note, the 2 victims did not get a good ID of the perpetrator. It was pretty clearly the same person. They were both wearing a mask. It was like the same situation, kind of. So one way or another, the DNA was basically the only way that they could identify the perpetrator.
Okay.
The primary evidence used to convict was the blood, semen, hair samples taken from the scenes of the crime. And it turns out the blood test that Fred Zane used to convict Glenn Woodall would only narrow down the results to 10,000 people. Glenn happened to be one of them.
Did they just is it type of blood or
Like something like that, or I don't know how the blood testing has like accelerated from like type to like specific, like more specific stuff, but yeah, it was not specific enough to convict.
So there was literally a 1 in 10,000 chance it was him.
Yes. Yep. And Fred was like, that's you, baby. Yeah. And Fred had also changed one of the hairs that he had obtained from a pubic hair found at the scene of the crime to a beard hair of the victim.
So just fully swapped out the evidence to
Yep. That's how I understood it anyway.
supplant what he needed.
Yep. And so as a result, Glenn was freed and the case was dismissed in 92. Glenn Woodall was the very first client of a new nonprofit at Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law, which was made up of lawyers, students, and volunteers who used DNA testing to free wrongfully convicted people. This nonprofit would soon become known as the Innocence Project.
Yay! Which we got a message and then no follow-up, and I then didn't have the time. I think there's a branch of the Innocence Project in LA and a branch in New York, and they are not the same organ. I mean, they kind of same mission, but they are not like just different chapters.
You gonna let me finish my notes or like?
Shit, no, sorry. I mentioned them in the last episode that we did, something about the waters, and then we never like posted anything.
So
I just wanted to say,
no, you're good. You're good. I'm gonna
fucking with
kill
you.
Every time I opened my mouth, he opened his mouth, and I knew the jig was up. So Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, I'm sorry if I butchered that, seeing how significant DNA technology was in their work on a case of Marion Coakley. Marion Coakley was wrongfully convicted, again, despite a solid alibi, and was released in 87 after blood testing proved his blood type to be A, while the perpetrator's to be type B. Since exonerating Woodall between May 2000 and May 2015, DNA testing of the cases that the Innocence Project itself actually takes on, DNA testing proves 43% to be innocent, 42% to be proved guilty, and then 15% to be inconclusive. So it is like a solid majority, remembering that they get a lot of requests to take on their case. So of the requests that they're getting, about half of them end up being innocent.
Okay.
And since then, more organizations have cropped up across the U.S. with similar motivations and missions. The Innocence Network was started in 2005 and connects all these organizations. In total, there are 59 organizations in the network, including 3 nationwide organizations for legal help, the Innocence Project, Exoneration Project, and Center on Wrongful Convictions, and there are 2 nationwide organizations for exoneree support, Witness to Innocence and After Innocence. One of these many organizations is called the Los Angeles Innocence Project, which looks to have been established in August of 2022.
Okay.
This is a quote from an article I found on the launching of the LA Innocence Project. So prior to launching LAIP, the attorneys worked together to free 13 clients who collectively lost 273 years to wrongful incarceration. So, I mean, they have a track record.
273 years?
Years between 13 people.
So they're averaging 20 years. I know that's not the exact math, but we're in the
that's
ballpark.
A lot of fucking years.
Per person.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about one of the cases that the Innocence Project has taken on.
Okay.
That I had mentioned recently. So this next section is called Meet Scott.
Is this the start of the story? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes. We're going to start October 2002 at a trade show in Atlanta, Georgia. A woman named Shawn Sibley meets a man named Scott, and they strike up a conversation that quickly becomes flirtatious.
Shawn and Scott?
Shawn and Scott.
I would trust them to make goat cheese, because it sounds like a gay couple who lives in upstate New York. Oh, you know the actual Shawn and Scott because of your research.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Shawn and Scott, to me, sounds like they own a goat farm in upstate New York.
Okay.
Maybe it's like they grow hemp, but like not the fun kind, like the fabric kind.
Yeah, that's lame.
I'm sorry. I will stop interrupting because I'm enjoying this, but I don't think you are. I think you're just being patient with me.
Once we get farther into the episode, you can interrupt all you want.
Gotcha. Okay, I will drink the champagne that Casey just provided us.
Okay. So Sean and Scott start talking. It gets very flirtatious very quickly, and almost immediately Sean is like, I'm engaged and I'm like not interested in anything else. But they keep talking. At one point, Scott asks her what her favorite sexual positions are. Not sure what her answer was, dying to know.
Was it infidelity?
Probably. So at some point, it's unsure if this was at the conference or later, Scott told her that he was thinking about adding the initials HB to his business cards that stood for horny bastard.
Oh, okay, nice.
Talking about sex, quote, was a constant thing with him. He always brought it up.
Ooh.
Just remember that. So Sean is engaged and tells Scott she's not interested. But Sean learns that Scott has recently lost the woman he believes was his soulmate. And he asks her if she thinks that means he'll be alone for the rest of his life.
But wasn't he just engaged 3 sentences ago?
No, Sean was engaged.
Oh, okay.
Sean's engaged. He's not. Here's a quote. Quote, he said he hadn't been successful in finding anyone and wanted a long-term relationship. As I got to know him, I began to think that he was serious about finding a relationship. So Scott asked Sean if she has any single friends that she could introduce him to. And one person does come to mind. Her name is Amber Frey. She does warn Scott, though, that Amber Frey has had bad luck with men in the past and also has a young daughter. And so she's really not looking for anything like casual. She's like looking to find the one.
Sure.
And if Scott's not actually serious, to like not worry about it because Amber's looking to settle down.
Is this a moment where I can make a funny little commentary, or no? Are we pretty in the weeds of it right now?
You can make a funny little
Okay.
commentary. Right?
As a person who's dating in their early 30s, it definitely feels a little bit like we're on the deck of the Titanic right when all of the passengers kind of realize there's no more lifeboats left. I just kind of feel like every other day someone's like, see that piece of driftwood out there? What if that would save your life forever? And it's like, I would rather go down with the ship than cling to something
Especially
that can't support me. That's a perfect analogy.
A single woman in California in this is early 2000s? Girl.
Later conversation, possibly over drinks, but my brother and sister-in-law, lovely, love them both so much. They were like, this isn't to be like, you need someone to complete yourself, but like, I know you had the chance to like bring someone if you wanted to. What's that situation like? And I was like, all of my emotional needs are met by the women you love in my life. Why would I complicate
Me and Lydia
that?
need to back off.
No, you're right. Your absence would do me good. Come on, Ryan. Come on.
Okay.
This blimp's barely tied to the ground.
Like the blimp in Bridgerton.
Exactly.
Have you seen the TikTok of the woman? It's like, this is me impersonating the blimp. Hey, girl, you look great. You might want to move. So you should maybe move. You look great, by the way. I love.
Mama, let me whisper in your ear.
It's the slowest fucking thing.
Anyways, I would rather go down with the ship, and so I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So,
I understand this moment for her.
Yeah. So Amber Frey, she lives in Fresno, and from the impression I get, Sean lives nearby or something. I don't know. So Amber's friend Sean tells her that she has someone for her to meet. So on November 20th, 2002, Amber and Scott meet up at a bar in Fresno. And then they end up going to dinner. Scott had reserved a private room at the restaurant for their dinner.
Okay.
Scott also got a hotel room that they ended up going to enjoy some strawberries and champagne that
Little
Scott had
fast
brought.
and forward, but okay.
Yeah, and I think they slept together. Not totally sure. Not really relevant either. But Amber's like, this guy seems perfect.
Right.
Like, he's thoughtful. He's pulling out all the stops, and he seems serious.
This is what romance in movies is like. So
Exactly.
this is what I want.
Like a little rom-com. And so Scott seems committed and interested in pursuing something serious. They move pretty quickly in their relationship from here. And Scott says he would love to meet her daughter, who's, I think, like around 1.5 years old at this point. Maybe closer to 2. December 2nd, Scott comes over to Amber's house with groceries to cook dinner for her and her daughter. He also brings Amber's daughter a gift. Amber says that she wants to keep the wine cork from dinner as a memento, and Scott tells her that there will be many more memories to come. Yeah.
She's beginning to trust.
Scott spends the night that night, and on the next day, December 3rd, Scott picks up Amber's daughter from school, and so he's really kind of stepping into dad role, like not being afraid of the fact that she has a daughter.
Too. They started, dating in November?
Late November, yeah. That night, he makes them dinner again, and then the three of them go out to pick a Christmas tree and bring it back and decorate it. While decorating the tree, Amber uses that time to get to know Scott on a deeper level. So She asks him two crucial questions that will come back later. She asks him if he has ever been married or has ever been close to getting married, and he says no. She then asks him if he's ever had kids or if he's ever been close to having kids with someone, and he also says no. So she's like, cool. December 6th, Sean, the mutual friend, is talking to another friend who happens to know Scott. His name is Mike. Mike mentions that he coincidentally also knows someone named Scott with the same last name.
Oh.
And he was like, but it can't be the same one because the Scott I know is married with a baby on the way. And so Sean kind of freaks out and calls Scott.
I don't know why I'm shocked, because of course he is, of course they are, but still, the scoundrel.
Sean, like, freaks out, calls Scott, and Scott's to confront him. And after Scott initially is like, no, that can't be me, Scott eventually, like, completely breaks down and starts sobbing over the phone.
On the phone? Mm-hmm. Listen, if you can't even hold up to phone interrogation, don't lie, okay? Some of you are not middle children, and it is showing right now.
So Scott breaks down, starts sobbing, says that he had been married, but it was too painful for him to talk about because he had just lost his wife recently, and this was his first holiday season without her. And so he
What do you mean lost? Passed away? She had left him?
Seems
Third
like
mysterious
passed away.
option? Okay.
Seems like passed away. Sean believes it more or less, and Scott asks Sean to allow him to be the one to tell Amber so that Amber's not hearing it from
Sean's
third
like,
party.
okay, cool, I guess that tracks. You're crying on the phone, so that means you're definitely telling the truth. And Scott's like, yep, you got it. And if you could do me a favor, let me tell Amber. I know she's your friend, but I am her stepdad now.
Her dad.
Stepdad.
Yeah, her husband. Basically. And so she agrees. She said, I assume she was like, yeah, you have until like this day to tell my best friend about this.
I love the dramatics.
Yeah. And so December 9th, Scott does tell Amber that he lost his wife and this is his first holidays without her. Amber thanks him for coming clean to her and then like point blank is like, okay, are you actually sure you're ready for a serious relationship? Because it seems like you're not emotionally ready.
Arrested Development narrator moment.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Because we are, if it's December 9th, potentially less than 3 weeks since this relationship began.
Yes. Yeah, and so he says yes. December 14th, as kind of an apology, Scott comes over with a dozen red roses, and she's like, oh my God, so nice, and goes to get a vase.
Liars never buy flowers.
And then he was like, okay, well, I hope you have some more vases, because then he pulls out 2 more dozen pink roses. And then they attend a holiday party together where she introduces him as her boyfriend, and this is them at that holiday party.
Oh. Here's the thing. I have learned through your stories hedging, because I know something terribly dark and tragic is about to happen.
I started with the Innocence Project,
Amber, yeah, I know. This isn't a talking ferret twist.
Yeah.
Amber looks so happy.
Yeah.
And I wish her every happiness. And I am actively rooting for her right now in this story.
Yeah, this, like, the red dress is a vibe.
Scott looks like he was
hat.
a linebacker in high school and then was never good enough to make it in college, but did suffer the TBI, traumatic brain injury, that a linebacker normally receives.
He was a golfer, so...
Okay, I mean, so he was born with it then? Yeah. My brother plays golf, I can say it. No, he looks fine. He looks exactly like how men in the 90s looked, but she looks stunning.
She does look stunning, and yeah, that's all.
Honestly, he kind of reminds me of my cousin Chad.
He does look like a Chad.
Not meant derogatorily, but also not meant complimentary. Just kind of like, oh, that's Chad.
And what I love about the intro to this story is that those of you who know what...
Intro?
Well, the intro to the story, of itself, yeah. What I love about the way that I'm introducing the story is those of you who know what story I'm covering are, like, screaming right now.
Meanwhile, I'm like, bad dating vibes. Absolutely get away from him.
Absolutely bad, yeah. So December 15th, so the day after the holiday party, Scott tells Amber he's going on an extended trip for the holidays with his family or whatever and to see some friends. December 19th, 22nd, and 23rd, Scott and Amber speak on the phone. I think at this point, Amber's starting to like feel a little bit of anxiety because their relationship is so new and she has some trust issues. She's had some bad experiences with men in the past. And so she's like, I think at some point she's related this to Scott. December 25th, so she doesn't hear from him on the 24th. And then on the 25th, while on the phone with Amber, Scott tells her that he's in Maine with his family. December 27th, Scott tells Amber
Hold on, you're going to run by... Sorry, we're hitting me a lot of dates right now. So December 14th is the holiday party, and then...
December 15th, he's like, I'm about to leave on a long trip.
Surprise, forgot to tell you, I'm going to be out of town.
Yeah.
Okay.
December 19th, 22nd, 23rd, they talk on the phone.
Okay.
At some point, she starts getting a little anxious.
Right.
December 25th, on the phone. Christmas. Scott tells Amber he's in Maine with the family. I'm sure that's a longer conversation, but that's the big thing.
That's the detail that comes out.
December 27th, Scott tells Amber he's in New York, about to begin his overseas trip to Europe.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she knew that he was going to Europe.
None of this gets mentioned in the courtship?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
This is just how it's like revealed over time.
Okay.
Or how they have like a documented trail of it or something.
Okay.
So while on this call, he tells her that his flight was delayed, but the airline gave him a $100 credit and he's going to get a massage and a meal, and then he would call her back. Maybe that was a message. And then 2 hours later, he does call her back and tells her that he's about to board the flight. Amber tells him that she's having trust issues as a result of previous relationships and apologizes to him for being so needy. And Scott says, like, don't worry about it. Like, I understand. I'll just be more sensitive to, like, your needs, like, what you need from me emotionally. December 30th, a friend shows her a news article about a missing woman from Modesto named Lacey Peterson. And lo and behold, who is Lacey Peterson's husband but her very own Scott?
Okay, so I want you to know now, as a friend, what I would do in that situation. Okay, are you ready for this? I would, with several of our close friends, surprise you on a girls' trip to a town I know you don't know anyone in, like Kansas City or Albuquerque.
I don't know anyone in those cities.
And then on the first night in, we'd be like, listen, babes, we've actually kidnapped you because your boyfriend is a murderer. And that's what this newspaper says. He's a liar, a thief, a scoundrel, and a murderer. And here on this girls' trip, away from everyone else, we're going to rebuild your life, okay? You don't have to stay in Albuquerque or Kansas City. We just figured cheap starting off, you know? I've heard Santa Fe and Topeka also have some value to them, right? But we're going to go ahead and just kind of get you working remotely from here for a while until your murderer boyfriend leaves you alone, okay? And we've taken the keys. So...
have fun!
The barbecue's great! Do you want green chili or barbecue?
As a friend, that would be phenomenal.
I just want you to know.
I would cry because of how loved I felt.
If I found out the person you were dating was a murderer, I'm telling you that when you are not actively at the last place he had seen you. I'm telling you in a place where you actually can escape until I know you have seen the light, you know, and maybe that's an infringement on your civil rights. It actually 100% is. I teach civics. I love you, and if loving's a crime, you're not gonna get murdered.
Grant's got it fucking figured out.
I just can't.
End of case.
I can't do a whole year of podcasting with you and not have a plan for, I think Casey wants to murder Maya.
Which would never happen. It would be the other way around.
And now I'm morally conflicted because if you go to jail, who would? The podcast. So now I gotta fake the alibi. No, we were at PT together. See, it all comes together.
That was beautiful. I love that.
Thank you. That's what 7 Days in Wine Country will do to you. Just kind of
sounds really refreshing.
You know, it's not like volume up power button restart. It's like phone in rice restart. You know?
Yeah, full
100%.
Full factory reset.
I just kind of love that we send phones to the spa for a day. Yeah. To be like, you want to work now? Okay, buddy.
Okay, go on.
Sorry. Yeah. So her boyfriend's gone, and her friends are like, he's a murderer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that he's a murderer, but he is suspect numero uno in his wife's disappearance.
His last wife disappeared, presumed dead. And
yes, it's not. I think a lot of people were convinced that she had been kidnapped at this point. This is still very early on in the disappearance. So, just like quick overview, spoiler alert a little bit, not really. November 12th, 2004, so 2 years later, Scott Peterson was convicted of murdering both his wife and his unborn child. But January 18th...
The wound from Modesto.
Yes.
Okay.
Lacey Peterson. On January 18th, 2004, ABC News was the first to report that, quote, Scott Peterson case has been taken up by the Los Angeles Innocence Project, causing a commotion in the true crime community.
Yeah, I'm sure it had.
So let's get into the details.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about the case of Lacey and Scott Peterson. We're going to discuss some potentially sensitive subjects that I'll provide trigger warnings for. Yeah.
Okay, no, keep going.
Oh, yeah. But I'll say the majority of this episode is going to be discussing the timeline of events, which is crucial.
Okay.
And the media's portrayal of the case and the trial itself.
Okay, so we're talking about Lacey and Scott, not Scott and Amber?
Amber is going to play a huge part. A lot of people argue that this is actually a case about Amber.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to do my very best to lay out this case for you with none of my personal analysis. And I went through and tried to take out pieces that I felt like were me inferencing things.
Okay.
And I'm going to lay everything out.
And you mean the case against Scott for Lacey's disappearance and murder?
Yes. So I'm going to lay out all the facts as they've been presented. And then after I lay out the facts and before I get into the trial, I'll tell you all my little thoughts, little rat brain thoughts.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to do that is because when I tell you I was in the trenches with this case, when I read you the sources, I want you to think about how many hours of case this was. I went on a road trip this last weekend for my friend's birthday in Ouray, Colorado, which is 5 to 6 hours away from here. I drove alone there for a bunch of reasons. I had something going on, but on the way back, I drove people with me. And the way that I was I'm going to be listening to true crime.
The entire time?
The entire time, and I'm not taking requests.
You get a free ride back?
You're going to get into this case with me,
Correct.
So pick now whether or not you're interested. And also, I realized I have just an encyclopedic knowledge of the big true crime cases, and that really did something to my brain, because at some point they mentioned Michael Peterson, which you brought up actually I think last time, the staircase incident.
Yeah.
And they mentioned Michael Peterson. I paused it. I was like, so do you guys know about the staircase?
Okay, so what you need to know about that?
Yeah.
When you try to get your friends into fantasy or true crime, you're like, okay, so what you got to know?
What do you got to know about that? Yeah. And so all of the sources that I have listened to or watched or read, aside from the really unbiased, some of the news sources, everything else is really biased, and you can tell right away. There is a 6-part docuseries on Hulu that is one of my sources that is very biased towards Scott's innocence, and you can tell that literally because a lot of Scott's family are people that talk,
okay.
But it's also news reporters and some lawyers and some other people that are pretty adamant about Scott's innocence. And then there's a lot of other podcasts and stuff that are Scott fucking did this thing.
Okay.
And so people are really divided on this, and I want you, before I tell you all my little rat brain thoughts, to make up your own mind a little bit.
Earlier on, when you were giving us this rundown, I so desperately wanted you to say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, before you, I'm going to lay the facts of the case, and then I'm going to give you my little rat brain thoughts on it.
I'm going to let me my little rat brain thoughts on it, honestly.
When you millennial zennial cuspers end up in a legal profession.
And then don't worry about it, but we're going to get into it. Yeah, so my sources here, and there's a lot of information out there on this case. If you want the entire court transcripts are out there. I read the opening side of the defense, and I read a few experts, and I'm not going to necessarily recommend it. It's really dry.
Okay.
But it is really interesting, especially if you've listened to podcasts and you're really swayed one way or another based off of those sources. I really recommend listening to some of the other sources that are out there, because it is really interesting. So some of my sources that I'll link on our website are CNN, CBS, the San Mateo Journal, scottpetersonappeal.org, New York Times, The Innocence Project, the LA Innocence Project, The Innocence Network, ABC News, court transcripts, Dead to Me on YouTube, USA Today, Crime Weekly, episodes 1 and 2, The Murder of Lacey Peterson, the 6-part docuseries on Hulu, and then The Prosecutor's podcast, which is a 6-part series, and then a 1-part update on Scott Peterson. So a few. Just a few. I will say the Prosecutor's podcast, it's 2 prosecutors that really did a deep dive. I think one of them read almost all of the court transcripts, and they really break down how they would have approached it as lawyers, and it is really fascinating. So Lacey and Scott. Lacey Denise Rocha was born on May 4th, 1975 in Escalon, California, and grew up on her family's dairy farm. When her parents divorced, she and her brother Brent moved with her mom to Modesto, California. She was a high school cheerleader who graduated in 1993 and then went to Cal Poly for college. Scott Peterson was born in San Diego in 1972 as the youngest of 5. He is the only child of his mom and dad. So his mom came into the marriage with 1 son, and his dad came in with, I think, 2 boys, 1 girl. And then his mom also had 2 children before that she had put up for adoption that I heard in one of the sources that he ended up actually forming relationships with after the fact, which was very sweet. In high school, he was a really good athlete. He got a partial golf scholarship to Arizona State University. He played with one of the big golf players. I cannot remember his name because Phil something, I don't know. But he was very good at golf. Before finishing his degree at Arizona State University, he ended up moving back to California to go to Cal Poly. One of the reasons that people say that he left ASU is that when he was in high school, he was pretty easily the best at golf, and when he got to ASU, he was a little fish in a big pond, and he didn't handle that well, or his dad didn't handle that well. His dad, it seems like, came from a very poor area and like really had to work his way up, and it seems like his dad probably put a lot of pressure on him growing up. So Lacey then met Scott Peterson in 1995 at a cafe where he worked. This is a picture of the 2 of them.
Oh, they're adorable together.
I know, right?
She has such a great smile.
I know. Classic. So their first date was deep sea fishing date, and shortly after she met him, she told her mom that she had met the man that she would marry. Aww. And the 2 got married in 1997. This is a very
really
popular
happy.
picture of them at their wedding.
That's 97?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They successfully opened a restaurant shortly after marrying, and although it was successful, which people pointed out that it's actually really hard to open a successful restaurant that lasts more than a year, so it was successful. They ended up selling it and moving to Modesto because Lacey really wanted to start a family and be close to her family, you know.
And restaurant work is tough. Like working as a server, every job there is tough, and the profit margins are small. And I know people who try to make it. We have a lot of families at school who run like eateries, and it's just a tough business that takes all of your time.
So in Modesto, Scott got a job as like a fertilizer salesman. It was like a bunch of stuff, but it was mainly selling stuff to farmers.
My cousin Chad, also a salesman. So something about that face.
Is this Chad?
No, I was at Chad's wedding. It was one of the first times they'd ever had a Shirley Temple, and I had 12 of them.
Oh yeah, I remember that story. Okay. And then he was also like the West Coast representative, I think, for whatever company. Okay. And so he did have to travel quite a bit for his job. And then Lacey got a job as a substitute teacher. In June of 2002, so they've been married for 5 years Lacey discovers she's pregnant.
Can I ask, when does Scott and Amber start to date? What year is that?
That is 2002.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So that whole thing with Amber happens. Remember, she finds out about Scott on December 30th, 2002. So we're going to jump back a little bit to December 23rd, 2002, which is where our timeline is really going to start for this case.
Pause me for a second, though, because we were just Lacey and
Scott.
Scott was just married. What year was that?
1997.
Okay.
2002 in June is when she finds out she's pregnant.
Okay.
So she is 8 months pregnant now.
Okay.
Yes. So December 23rd, 2002, the day of, at some time the housekeeper comes to clean the house. 5:45 to 8:30 p.m., Scott and Lacey are at Lacey's sister's hair salon. Her name is Amy. Scott gets a haircut. Scott and Lacey invite Amy over for pizza afterwards. She says no, and also they're about to see each other the next day for Christmas Eve dinner at Lacey's parents' place. Scott mentions plans for the next day for Christmas Eve in the morning to go golfing, but he offers to pick up a basket for their papa at Vila Farms on the way home before dinner.
So just so I have my timeline right,
yep.
We're talking December 22nd, 23rd, 2002. Lacey's alive, and they're making Christmas Eve plans.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he's already been to a Christmas party with Amber.
Yes.
That's that same year.
Yes.
Amber's calling and being like, "Where are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm about to go to Maine with the family." Meanwhile, he's just in Modesto.
Yep.
So there is an overlap there.
Yes, there's a huge overlap.
Okay, so it's not like a year later and like it's just funny.
No.
Okay.
No. Right now, she thinks that he's in
somewhere
Maine
else
or wherever. Yeah.
And he's like truly 30 minutes down the road.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to wait until all facts of the case are presented.
Yes.
But I was like, men will literally, but whatever.
Literally. So Scott mentions plans to go golfing and that he'll pick up a gift basket for their papa on the way home before dinner. Amy recalls Lacey's wearing tan pants and a black blouse. That's important.
Okay.
Tan pants and a black blouse. So Amy doesn't end up coming with them, but Scott and Lacey go home, pick up pizza on the way home, and then they watch Monday Night Football. At 8:30 p.m., Lacey talks to Sharon Rocha, her mom, over the phone to confirm Christmas Eve dinner plans. Lacey's supposed to bring over this like French toast dish that she does. And then from 8:30 to about 10:30 p.m., they watch a movie called The Rookie, and then they go to bed. Scott recalls Lacey went to bed wearing his blue pajama bottoms. On December 24th, 2002, so the next day, Christmas Eve, around 8 a.m., Lacey wakes up and eats cereal right away because otherwise she'll get sick due to the pregnancy. Scott wakes up a little later. In the morning, they're watching Martha Stewart, and Lacey had plans to mop the floor, was planning on walking the dog, and then go to the store to pick up things for the dish she's making for the dinner. And Scott is planning on going golfing and picking up that basket from Vila Farms.
On Christmas Eve? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Between 9:20 and 9:40, someone sees Scott loading up his truck for work, and they say hello to each other. Scott's loading up patio umbrellas into the bed of his car to take to his warehouse and unload there.
Okay.
So he says initially he leaves at 8:40. What actually ends up happening is that they check like cell phone records, and Scott checks his voicemail at 10:08. And at the beginning of that call, his phone pings the tower that it always pings for when he's calling people from home.
Okay.
By the time he hangs up, he's pinging the tower he would ping at the warehouse.
So he is checking the voicemail or whatever, driving from his house to the warehouse.
Which is 3 miles away, so it's a really short drive.
Sure.
Yeah. 10:18, their neighbor, Karen Service, sees Mackenzie, the Petersons' golden retriever, walking around outside the house with his leash and collar on and dirty. She puts Mackenzie, she like knows them, she knows the dog.
Sure.
She puts Mackenzie in the Petersons' yard, closes the gate, but leaves the leash on just because it's like not my problem. Just
right.
like, I don't want you to get hit or whatever. Just shuts the gate and leaves. She knows this time because she has like receipts from the shopping she was doing earlier and stuff. So it could be as late as 10:30, but probably closer to 10:18. So 10:30 to 10:56, Scott is on his computer looking at some stuff about some tools. The guy says approximately for this time, but it's 10:30 to 10:56.
Yeah, approximately.
Like, approximate. Okay, guy, you know. And then at this point, Scott decides it's too cold to golf, so he decides to take the new boat he has out fishing.
Okay.
He loads up his new 14-foot aluminum boat and heads to Berkeley Marina. 10:57 to 11:17, Scott is cleaning up the warehouse and assembling a new tool that came in, and he loads some tools into the bed of his truck, forgetting to unload the umbrellas.
So when was he boating?
He's about to.
Okay, so he's putting stuff in his truck,
He's just
and
decided,
then he's going to go boating.
11:12 to 12:50, he is on the hour-and-a-half drive to Berkeley Marina.
Okay.
At 12:45, Scott has a receipt from when he got to the marina. It's like $15 per launch at the marina. So he has that ticket.
It's a lot in 2002.
I know, yeah. 1 o'clock to about 2:11, Scott is on the water, so only about an hour. He motored north toward an island, which he said had a lot of trash, broken piers, and no landing sign. It turns out, after further investigation, that this is Brooks Island.
Okay.
2:15, Scott leaves the marina and calls Lacey.
He was there for an hour? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he's about to head home, and he calls Lacey on the home phone and on the mobile phone. And I meant to get this recording, so hold please while I get this. And there is a recording.
So this is the recording he leaves on the home answering machine.
This is the one that was on Lacey's cell phone.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what he says. You can pretty easily hear it, but there's a lot of like static and stuff. He says, hey, beautiful, I just left a message at home, 2:15. I'm leaving Berkeley. I won't be able to go to Vila Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there. I'll see you in a little bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
Hey, beautiful. I just left a message at home. 2:15. I live in Berkeley. I won't be able to get to Villa Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
So that's that message.
Okay.
2:15 to 4:30, he's driving back to the warehouse. Assumably there's like traffic.
Is it weird that he mentioned the time in the voicemail?
Is it?
I'm trying to remember back in 2002. I have memories from 2002, but I'm obviously not leaving like a lot of voicemails. Because I know our answering machine, the last one we had before we got rid of the landline, like, message received at 1:32 p.m.
Right.
Right? But interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
2:15 to 4:30, he's driving back to the warehouse. He stops for gas. He does not have a receipt for that. 4:30, he arrives at the warehouse, drops off the boat, again, forgets to unload the umbrellas. Around 4:45, he gets home, and Lacey's car's in the driveway, which isn't unusual. The dog is in the backyard. That's the weird thing.
This man was gone almost all day on Christmas Eve. Okay.
Yeah. He thought that Lacey had been picked up by her mom to like go over to the mom's place to start preparing for dinner. And so he wasn't super concerned. He puts his clothes in the washer. He grabs some pizza from the fridge, dumps out the mop bucket that he had filled for her early in the morning because she was going to mop. And he takes a shower. And then he plays all the voice messages on the voice machine, and he realizes there's a message from Lacey's stepdad asking for them to bring over whipped cream. And that's when he starts to get worried because he's like, she should have seen this.
Okay.
And so Scott calls Sharon, Lacey's mom, and asks if Lacey's there, and Sharon says no. And so that's when the alarm bells for everyone start ringing. And at 5:47, Lacey's stepdad calls the police. So
Okay.
that's
On
the
Christmas
timeline.
Eve.
Yeah, before the police get involved. Do you have any questions?
A lot, but not in terms of like sequence of events
Okay,
or facts
okay,
as they've
cool.
been presented.
Excellent. So the investigation begins. They send out a man named Al Brocchini, who's the lead detective. What a fucking name also, Al Brocchini. There's a quote from the documentary that's, couldn't imagine a better guy to go out there the first night because of his bulldoggedness.
I need to pause this here for a second. Do you know what Fetty Wap's full name is?
No.
Fettuccine wet ass pussy.
You're cut off.
I know I am. I saw it on Twitter today. I'm going to mention it again during Patreon just to let the masses know. But I'm going to jump back in with an actual question now.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Okay, so I actually do have one more question. When was the last time... What's her name again? Sorry.
Lacey.
Lacey. Thank you. I was like, I know it's not Lucy. When was the last time Lacey confirmed seen by somebody, not Scott?
8:30 p.m. she talks on the phone with her mom.
The night before.
The night before, the 23rd.
Okay. So it's not like the neighbor shopping saw her out with the dog, or like she wasn't helping Scott
get
load the
into that.
umbrellas
Yes.
into the truck. Like no one, and none of the interactions people have had with Scott or the dog, and none of the interactions we have of people at the house, Lacey hasn't been there for any of them.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. We will get into some sightings of Lacey, but those haven't come out yet in the like story. But also, I was a little loopy, I think, when I was watching this episode where they introduced Al Brocchini because
Which is an insane name.
Which is an insane name. And then the quote about his bulldoggedness, and then my next bullet is LMAO. With a name like that, it has to be good. Parentheses, like the Smuckers jingle. The name like Smuckers.
Yeah, I think that was a little late in your researching process. Also,
No, it was early, and that's the sad thing.
the like butch side of me is like, well, yeah, Fresno State University is the Fresno State Bulldogs, and Fresno State is probably the local state university in this area.
Anyway,
I have visited Modesto before. I don't know if you know. I have spent time in the North Central Valley.
good. You've been where a lot of the true crime happens.
Yeah, we actually were in Lohi once, which was crazy.
Good. So anyway,
Continue.
so Scott willingly allows all the detectives to go through the house and do like a preliminary search,
Okay.
and they find nothing. After that, they bring him over to the station, and there's about a 1-hour session where they not interrogate him. I don't want to say that because it's definitely not that intense, but they're asking him questions. Scott tells them that she in the morning was wearing a white blouse and black pants, which is important.
Okay.
The detectives are really trying to suss out what the relationship was like between Scott and Lacey, and so they're asking if there were any marital problems, to which Scott says no, they weren't having any issues.
He's actively dating Amber at the time.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep.
Just to make sure I'm still aware of that second relationship going on.
So Scott would later be asked when he first realized the police thought he was a suspect, and he said that he overheard a officer on the radio saying, quote, "The husband is suspicious," on the day of the disappearance. That first night, they also ask Scott if he's willing to take a polygraph, and initially he says yes after asking if they're accurate. Scott's dad, however, Lee, advises that he doesn't take a polygraph.
Yeah.
Because he knows that if he passed, they would never hear about it, and if he didn't pass, it would be
the only thing they
it would
hear
be
about.
splashed
Right.
all over the news.
It's also not a hard science, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, police just lie.
Right. That was the theme of my last true crime episode too.
Yeah. So police wanted to rule him out, and so they're getting a little frustrated with him. They're like, "Come on, man! Like, you can't not be a suspect just because of the matters of the case, and we just want to let us help you."
Sure.
You know. And
We're your
so,
friends.
Yeah, they're frustrated because although he wants to find his wife, he's not doing what the police are asking. And so there's a call where the detective is talking to Scott, giving him a heads up, saying that the media wanted a statement, and they were asking if Scott was being cooperative. And the police aren't going to say that he's not being cooperative, but they're also going to be blunt and say, he isn't being fully cooperative. And so this is the beginning of the court of public opinion.
Right.
If you will.
How are you going to have an impartial jury if your police chief is like, he's not being cooperative?
Yes. And so the officer's first impression is that Scott doesn't seem interested in what they're doing. Obviously, no one can say how you should grieve. And that's a pretty common theme, and one that I get really irritated at the documentary with, because Nancy Grace, man, had so many opinions.
That's a bulldog.
That's a freaking bulldog, dude. I don't care about Al Brocchini, man. Nancy Grace will execute you. She is judge, jury, and executioner.
100%. A little wooden pencil.
Yeah. At some point, I think she just says, "He rubbed me the wrong way," and I was like, "Ma'am,
That's not high enough legal bar.
that's actually not how this works, my man." So at some point, Lacey's stepfather, Ron, who's really into fishing, and part of the reason Scott says that he bought his fishing boat, Ron asks Scott what he would have been fishing for at that time of day, and Scott just got quiet and walked away, which is weird. He's also quoted telling other family members that he went golfing that day, which he didn't. And then he also shows some people his hands and says, quote, "I wouldn't be surprised if they found blood in my truck because I cut my hands all the time." Lo and behold, he does warn the police that, I cut my hand on a toolbox, here, Oof. And they do find, a spot of blood, but that's all they find. They don't find anything else. So it's a weird thing to say.
So there's no evidence of blood in the truck, though?
No. Nope, not aside from, a single drop of his blood.
So far, the thing is, can silence convict you? And not in the American court system, at least not technically.
He's just being weird. No one can say, you're, acting... he is acting suspicious, but based on the facts of the case, he's not, right? So the police don't find any evidence in his home. The things that they do find that they take note of are there's a mop bucket out from Lacey mopping the floor that morning. There's also some duffel bags that have been pulled out of some closets. They do find a few of Lacey's hairs, one that's in a pair of rusted shut pliers, which doesn't worry anybody, though, because she's been to the warehouse, and it's I shed all the time. If you don't find my hair, I'm more concerned at that point.
Right.
And a couple of her hairs in his boat. In the warehouse, they find evidence of concrete that had been poured, which Scott said was from him pouring his own anchor for the boat, because the boat he got didn't come with an anchor.
Okay.
And this is what that anchor looked like, this piece of concrete bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My relatives, especially my dad, but also some of my uncles and older cousins, talked about how the tiny little small town farm high school that they went to, just a tiny little country school. I mean, a great school, gem of the community, but limited in resources. That is how they made their weights. They just poured increasingly larger buckets full of concrete, and that was their weight room.
It makes me so nervous.
It just makes me skin sensitive. You know?
It just I don't like the sensation of concrete. Yeah. But and then when they see all the evidence of concrete being poured, it does look like there was more concrete than just enough for this anchor. And so they're like, "What'd you do with the rest of this concrete?" I'll mention this again later down, but he was like, "Oh, there's a hole in, or by the driveway that I filled," and they go, and sure enough, there's concrete in that hole.
Okay.
There are numerous sightings of Lacey walking the dog after the 10/18 Karen Service sighting of Mackenzie, all saying that they saw
After the sighting of Mackenzie? Mm-hmm. So, like, the dog gets put in the backyard, and then Lacey takes her out to go walk. And are these, like, credible witnesses? Or just like, I saw a lady with a dog?
It becomes a big point.
Okay.
So I'll let you judge. They all basically say they saw a very pregnant woman walking a golden retriever, that she fit Lacey's description. She was wearing a white top, black pants.
Okay.
Some of these people, I think there was close to like 24 total people. Some got ruled out because it just like didn't make sense, and some were like in different countries, so it was like wild. I think it ended up being close to like 12 or 13 that were actually like made sense. A few of these are Vivian and Bill Mitchell, Homer and Sue Maldonado, Tony Freitas, Frank Aguilar, and Diane Campos.
And those were all witnesses or potential suspects?
People that just saw her.
Okay.
That called into the tip line after she's reported missing. There is a tip from Tom Harshman, who said he saw a young woman being handled outside of a van, and that it looked like she was being taken out of the van to like pee and then go back in. This happened in the afternoon of the 24th, a few miles away from the house, and the woman was wearing a red blouse and black pants.
Okay.
So that's some of the initial evidence. The media. So this is right around the time that news sources went to 24/7 media, and so they were always on the hunt for new stories. Not only this, but Lacey was reported missing on December 24th, where the news media typically experiences a lull in new media. And so, of course, this like kind of took over. And also the other big thing that's happening around this time in 2002 is the beginnings of the Iraq War. And so the media is like, do we cover this salacious case of this like beautiful young woman who went missing in California, or do we cover George Bush?
Right.
So, I mean,
it's a hot news time. Those are the two hot tickets.
Yeah, it is really cool in watching the docu-series again. I don't think I really processed what they were doing, but they would like have a clip of like an old news clip of the Iraq War and coverage of George Bush, and then it would like kind of like the static of like changing a channel and then switch to the news coverage of Lacey, and they would do that like the entire time, and I thought that was like a really interesting way to like keep reminding you of like.
So it happens at a time when the media is looking to focus their attention on something.
On something, yeah.
Because December 2002, we haven't actually launched our invasion of Iraq yet. Like it's being talked about, but
it happens in
it's
March,
all like it's all like meetings of the UN and not like what the news media would like to show, which is like explosions and planes and like battleships and
exactly.
stuff. I remember that coverage. In 2003, I am 10. I remember that coverage 100%.
I'm surprised you don't remember this case though.
I doubt it's something that my parents would have let linger on the channel for too long.
That's fair.
I had to sneak around to watch Family Guy in high school, so this isn't.
That's fair.
You know.
Yeah.
Iraq War is news. This is just
come on.
Exactly.
So there is some information given either by the media or to the media that was circulated that affected the public's perception of it. And quite a bit of it was not true.
Okay.
For example, the biggest one is that they reported that the police had said the house smelled like bleach when they went in. This was not the case. There are no police reports saying that it smelled like bleach. So this is something.
Also, if Lacey had just mopped the floor, then it would probably smell like cleaner of some kind.
Yeah, of something. Also, Nancy Grace, for some unknown goddamn, she is interviewed in the docuseries, and it is a valuable input to have, especially since it is so biased in the other direction.
I'm joking.
Yeah, she's so apologetic. She does make a point, though, that she never got paid for any of her appearances on Larry King. And I was like...
She was just a hater. She was a day one OG skeptic.
I was like, why did you do it then? But
well, what you gotta understand, darling, is Larry King's a wonderful time after the show.
I'm like, hey.
That's my vibe. Anytime anyone's with Larry King, I'm like, oh, y'all have stayed up for 24 hours together before. Like, you've just seen the sunrise.
So you've just seen a lot.
In New York, yeah.
So Lacey Grace, for whatever reason, felt it was her job to speak for Lacey. For background, Lacey's fiance was murdered just before her wedding. or just before their
You
wedding.
need to say that again. Nancy's?
Yes.
You said Lacey twice there.
Sorry, Nancy Grace felt like it was her job to speak for Lacey.
Okay.
Nancy's fiance was murdered right before her and her fiance, Nancy and her fiance, were supposed to get married.
Okay.
And so this was like a real...
Is that what introduces her to the world of true crime reporting?
Basically, she did a real like Betty Ann Waters situation where
Okay.
she went to law school to become a prosecutor.
Oh, crap.
And then she even says in the docuseries, like she went to become a prosecutor and then she like obviously became a TV pundit for some things. But I think she is still a prosecutor. And she says in the docuseries she didn't like Scott's demeanor and that he was a player, and that was what really triggered her about him.
Okay.
Forensic evidence found, or the media also reported that there had been forensic evidence found in the house. This was not true. There was
Okay.
no forensic evidence found in the house.
Because it doesn't sound like they find the body of the victim in the house.
No, nothing.
She's just reported missing as soon as he gets home from his outing for the day.
Yep. Yeah. So the initial community response is like tons of community members come out to help the search. There's a massive tips. They have like little headquarters where searches are being headquartered out of. People are putting up flyers. Local restaurants are supplying food for the volunteers.
Sure.
People are canvassing the community, asking if they've seen anyone that looks like this, you know. Lots of people call in saying they saw Lacey at the morning of the disappearance with her dog, as I mentioned. Scott allowed the search on the 24th without complaint. The police wanted to search the house again on the 26th, and he was like, yeah, absolutely, let me talk to my attorney first.
Right.
And basically, the attorney didn't get back to him in time, and the cops also didn't care. They already had a search warrant. They just wanted to see what his reaction would be. And so they executed the search warrant before he got to hear from his attorney, and so that comes off as him being like, wait, no, don't search my house anymore.
Okay,
and so that's
okay.
another misread. So Scott also wasn't really in the media, which I can get. But if you're thinking that your wife was kidnapped, wouldn't you want to be more open about it? And also, the real issue here is that Lacey's family is very present in the media, doing interviews,
Sure.
all of that stuff. Scott's family is even in the media doing interviews and stuff, and he is just not.
Obviously I have never been in this position,
Yeah.
because obviously I would never get engaged to anyone ever or live with anybody. But I, as like the civics teacher who's like Fifth Amendment rights, so like I get Scott's approach
Yeah,
of like,
absolutely.
I'm not saying anything without the guidance of my attorney. I get that.
I get that,
Especially
too.
if you understand too that like you are a prime witness, number one. And you're a weird dude who was actually cheating on his pregnant wife.
Which
I 100%,
hasn't even come out yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I 100% being like, let's just talk to the lawyer about everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And then moving from there.
Especially since his dad's initial like reaction was like, don't do the polygraph. Like, let's get you lawyered up. So now he's like being a lot more careful. However, I do think there is a situation where you can't win right here, because if you're already a
100%.
suspect. So for example, there's another Lacey case. I mentioned, I think when I brought this case up when you last mentioned the Innocence Project, that I confused this case with two other cases, and coincidentally, I bring both of them up. And actually, there's a third one that I won't bring up because it just makes me sad. But this is the first one. This is another Lacey case. It's Lacey with an E.
Okay.
Our Lacey is L-A-C-I. This one is L-A-C-I-E. So Lacey Blackwell went missing in Japan, and her father and sister flew to Japan and stayed for however many months, because the cops kept trying to, as soon as it would get cold, they would start doing more media appearances to get more attention to it. But they also ended up pissing off like the police,
Sure.
the government, and then people started to think that he was doing it for the fame.
For the attention.
So it's like you can't win. You're in the media, you want it for the attention.
Sure.
You're not in the media, you don't care.
But if I can't win either way, then I'm choosing the route that incriminates me for less.
Yes.
In a court of law, not in a court of public opinion.
Exactly. So
Okay.
it's just like, it's hard to win. But one way or another, you can't really argue that he's doing himself any favors at
Right.
this point, because he's already kind of becoming public enemy number one. And by not showing his face, it's like not helping the public's perception of him.
Right.
And so a lot of media attention is starting to blame Scott. Obviously, the husband did it. And Lacey's family, the Rochas, are pretty firm, saying like, no, we don't suspect him. He has
Oh, wow.
loved
Okay.
Lacey this whole time. He is not a suspect in our mind. So now we're to December 26th.
Okay.
The Medinas, who live directly across the street from the Peterson house, are returning from their holiday vacation to find their home has been burglarized. When this comes out, another neighbor realizes that they did see something suspicious in front of the Medina household around 11:40 a.m. So after Mackenzie has been found, after or maybe during some of the sightings of Lacey on the walk.
But officially when Scott is gone.
Yes, when Scott is gone on the 24th. So that neighbor, when she realizes that connection, there's already a media frenzy out on their street. She's able to literally just walk outside and tell someone what she saw, which is just like crazy.
So is that when I put Mackenzie in the backyard at 10:20? Is that when that comes out?
No, I think that comes out pretty early, like initial.
So what does she say to the press?
She just says, like, I saw something suspicious. She says she saw a van with like 3 people that looked suspicious, and as she drove by, they all stopped and stared at her. And it like kind of weirded her out, but she was like, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Right.
But then when she found out that house had been burglarized, she was like...
Right across the street from the Petersons.
Oh, yeah, right across...
Has it been, like, ransacked, or did they just take a couple things?
It seems like they just kind of took the safe is gone. There's probably a couple other valuables gone.
Okay.
It is like a classic robbery,
right.
you know?
Smash and grab.
Yeah, smash and grab. And it is New Year's Eve, or Christmas Eve.
And
so
it's the middle of the day, it sounds like.
I think, I think they say they rob in the morning.
Okay.
Early in the morning. So... people start wondering if this could be connected to Lacey's disappearance.
Or just connecting it immediately like I did.
Yeah. So they tried to rob the Petersons first, but Lacey was home and got caught in the crosshairs. Maybe she saw something and tried to stop them. And her family does say she is the type that like go confront somebody. But it is... the prosecutors do point out that it is a big jump from petty theft or criminal, that kind of criminal activity to murder.
Right.
And so it is kind of whatever. But within a day, actually, I think the burglars are caught. I don't have their names written here.
How?
They're not good at their jobs.
Okay.
I don't know. So when they're
Priors and their fingerprints are all over the scene. Okay.
When they're arrested, the first words out of their mouth were, quote, "I had nothing to do with the pregnant girl."
Oh, shit. Okay.
Which is either incriminating
or
not
super
not at all.
Yeah. I actually kind of walked in because I'd rather go to jail for burglary than jail for burglary and murder. Yes.
Yeah. And so...
the tough thing about this, and I will give you credit as a storyteller, I feel like you have done a really good job trying to stay as close to the middle of the road as possible, while at the same time being like, no, you're right, and thinking that that's weird, but you're also right and thinking like that's weird.
Not weird.
You've done a really good job of that so far, and
excellent. Good.
Sorry, I'm just like trying to compliment you as a storyteller right now. I'm all over the place on this story.
Good. As you should be.
Good.
So
in episode 2, we'll cover what the answer was. Bye. I'm kidding.
I am making it through these notes a lot faster. I think it will be like a 3-hour episode.
I'm here on the edge of my seat, and also you told me an hour ago not to interrupt you anymore, and so I was like,
I think we're getting to a place where you can let me get through the next section, and then you can interrupt me all you want.
There's also this risk too during these sections where it's like, well, that's ridiculous, and then they're like, because he was taking care of children with cancer.
Yeah.
Like, I should have waited another second, you know. Like during the facts of the case portion, you got to be real careful about funny little quips, like on either side. So I'm like, and just so I know that fits into this box this way. Good to know. Good to know. Good to know.
Okay, so the burglars are caught. They confess. They're like, absolutely.
Right.
We burglarized that house. We had nothing to do with the other thing.
If they would like their family jewels back,
here they are.
The rest are at 24/7 Pawn at the corner of Main and First, where you will not find her body because we did not have anything to do with it.
That. Yeah. So the burglars said...
I love a burglar with a sense of moral code. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A little. The burglars said that they robbed the place at 4 a.m. on the 26th.
Wait, like the morning the Medinas return home?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about it. In a second. Hold your tongue. And that during the burglary, they had put the safe out on the front yard while they continued to rob the house.
What? Sorry.
Yep. The issue is that by the 26th, the media was already starting to flood the neighborhood.
Right.
And remember, they're doing 24/7 coverage.
Right.
So there is a reporter, at least, that says, I was out there by 3 a.m. There's no way that could have happened.
The only way you get that spot in front of the house is if you were there at 3 a.m., like ready to go.
And at one point, they have a clip of him on that day, and they just kind of zoom into the Medina house in the backyard. And there's nothing going on.
Do you under click and drag as it pixelates?
Yeah, exactly. So basically no way that this happened on the 26th. What we think probably happened is that the burglars lied to distance themselves from the actual
Because it actually does
murder.
happen on the 24th.
Yeah, and so either the cops knew that happened on the 24th and just didn't want to release it to the media to give them more content to be like, well, it's the burglars, you know? And so that's what we think.
It's not
probably
convenient for the
happened.
cops' narrative, so it doesn't become mainstream news right away.
Exactly.
Okay.
So December 31st, 2002, there's a vigil for Lacey, a candlelight vigil.
Okay.
The event is set to begin at 4:30, but people start coming before.
In the evening?
In the evening, yeah. This is a picture from the vigil.
Oh, wow, it's a huge turnout.
The community comes out in full
Also,
force.
every single jacket you see there was made in the 90s.
Yep.
Like, it is a really touching scene, and also you could date...
Nostalgic.
I could blindly date that photo to within 18 months.
Fair. Yeah, it's all the like
I
neoprene.
miss it, Maya.
Yeah.
I miss it. I told you I don't want anyone to be able to reach me anymore. I would love to like have an answering machine when I get home. What if I did that? What
You
if I
might
just fully
just, like,
switched over to a landline?
Get murdered though, and no
I
one
think
will
I can
know.
bundle. Look at me. I'm a well-known public school teacher. There's no money
I have no money
and also
no
prospects. And
I'm frightened.
I have to. Okay, 1 second. I'm adding another thing to my notes.
Patreon episode's gonna be fun, guys.
Yeah, I actually don't know if you're going to have anything to say.
No, I probably won't.
Because I have... You can't continue. Sorry, 10 sec. I got to get the wording right.
Do 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 do
Do, 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 do.
do.
All right, we
You
had a
made
close
it.
game. Maya, we'll start off with you in third place.
What is murder in the first
Ooh,
degree?
we were looking for Benjamin Franklin.
Damn it! Okay,
That was so dumb, but I
yeah.
love you. Okay, so talk to me.
So we're at the
there's
vigil.
a vigil, okay?
It starts at 4:30. I think that's when people start talking, but the vigil, I think people start coming earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
So the family speaks at the vigil saying, like, thank you so much for coming.
As in Lacey's family or Scott's family?
Both.
Okay.
Not Scott.
Okay.
Notable. Everyone is like, please, if you know anything about it, like, come to the police. If you have her, come home. Lacey, if you've run
Is
away,
this
come
the
home.
inspo for Gone Girl?
I think this probably plays into a little bit.
Okay, I'm just waiting for someone to be like, what did you do to your wife, Ben Affleck? And of course, we're talking about J-Lo right now.
Yeah. So everyone speaks, not just Lacey's family, Scott's family as well. Scott does not speak and was clearly avoiding the camera.
Okay.
They managed to get a couple pictures of him.
Okay.
The media. There's one picture that I don't have of him. He's like having a moment with his niece and he's like smiling at her. Obviously not a great look for him to be smiling, but it's with
Right.
a child. I feel like that's easy to.
Right.
This one, you don't have the full picture. He's holding a candle as if he was holding a beer almost with two other men and he's laughing. This is the photo that gets released.
That's really tough.
It's not a good look.
It's not a good look, but also, very, not an apples to apples comparison. I feel like I've been saying that a lot recently. In March, my grandma passed away, and that was really sad.
Yes.
And it had been the first time in a while in my adult life that someone like close
Passed
to
away,
me
yeah.
had died. So much so that you would like go to the viewing for most of it. And so
Yeah.
me and my brother and sister-in-law show up, thinking it's going to be this like quiet, somber
Affair,
affair.
yeah.
We even like stop our conversation as we get to the sidewalk that leads to the funeral home, and we're like, like very somber. And we open the door, and it sounds like we are at a family reunion. There's just like you can hear like plates in the background, and there's all the chatter. And it's like honestly, it was like a joyous moment where like the huge extended family all came together and was talking again. And then also in the corner was my grandmother's casket, and it was just this like insane dichotomy of like there is of course grief, but then there is
Yeah.
also at the
Like
same
celebration.
time joy to be around people.
Yeah.
Not the same situation at all whatsoever. Because
Especially-
we know why grandma was in the casket.
Yeah, we don't know where Lacey is, and
Right.
also
If she's even alive.
this is juxtaposed with Lacey's mom crying at the microphone, talking about how Lacey would be so happy to know she had so many friends, and
Yeah.
Scott's mom crying on the microphone.
If someone was sobbing at the viewing, I think it would have changed the mood a little bit.
and then we have this picture of Scott, and like I
Yeah.
assume he's not going around smiling the whole time, but like this happening to be the photo that gets
what
released.
date is that?
December 31st.
I'm sorry. So only because I know it's going to come back eventually.
Yes.
All of this is happening, and he's telling Amber I'm about to go international for a little bit.
That's actually
and
a phenomenal segue,
And
Grant.
is it really?
Yeah.
I was like, he's dating in his hometown and is claiming to be single and is claiming to be single, a widower, and is claiming to be a widower in November. Like, all of that
Claiming to have
sucks.
just lost his wife.
Right.
And about to be going through his first holiday without her.
But, like, regardless of how suspect that is, because, like, your actions in one area of your life do not necessarily make you guilty for something in a different area. What is shocking to me, shocking in a way that's not shocking for long-term listeners of the podcast, is the audacity of a man to try to flirt and date a woman when you are making the news all the time, you know?
It's shocking to me that Amber, even in the documentary, was like, I wasn't watching the news.
How?
Yeah.
Girl, how?
I know.
And how does it take one friend with, like, one newspaper clipping? How do you not sit her down and be like, watch Nancy Grace this entire hour?
Just
like,
absolutely bury
part of me, like, that is
boyfriend.
both not watching the news and then also the, like, in the news so much but still dating somebody.
You know, the craziest part is that, so Amber finds out on the 30th. The fact of the matter, they went to that party on the 14th where she introduces him to all of her friends as her boyfriend.
Right.
The fact that if she hadn't done that, I don't know what friend it was that told her. The only other person that knows theoretically that they're dating is Sean at that point. So if she hadn't introduced him to so many friends, she might have not found out when she did.
Okay, I just needed to also point, like, he is making front page news. There's a photo of him in the newspaper.
In the newspaper, yep. So Amber Fry, we left off when she just found out about Scott Peterson's missing wife. When she finds out, she calls the police and says, I'm dating him. And they say, will you help us? They go to Radio Shack and buy a recorder that attaches to her phone so she can record every conversation that happens from here on out.
So she's like, ring-a-ding-ding, I have something you're going to want to know. I'm dating him right now.
And they say, can we meet up
And there's photos of us taken prom style at this Christmas party. And they're like, let's go ahead and get some entrapment going, babe. Let's absolutely get that going. And do not tell Nancy Grace, because it'll blow her cover.
Yeah. So this recording comes, I think this is around the time that they're still trying to figure out the recorder, because there's a lot of static and you can hear the...
And it's 2002.
Yeah, I think the next recording I'm about to show you is a little bit better.
Okay.
She recounts the first call. She says that they were outside of Radio Shack. They had just installed the radio.
Oh, and they were like, do you want to go ahead and give him a call right now?
No, and then he calls her.
Sorry, that wasn't even a fake gasp.
No,
I was just like,
and she was like shaking, and the call disconnected because it didn't have good connection. And so I think it took them a couple tries. This is the call that happens on the day of the vigil at 3:15 p.m. People are around.
The day of the vigil, so he's in the park.
Yes.
It's like 45 minutes before it starts, but people are already there. And he like steps aside into some bushes to call her, and he's going to say this. Just for listener, I've never heard this audio before. This is
the first audio. This is about 30 seconds in. The first bit is really just them being like, can you hear me? No, I can't hear you. Yeah, so this is the first. He can't hear her, so he just like kind of starts talking, assuming that she can hear him, but he can't hear her.
I wish you could hear me. I'm on the, I think that you're there. I'm near the Eiffel Tower, New Year's celebration, unreal. The crowd is huge.
The crowd's huge?
Amber.
Yeah, I'm here.
That's really all that's in that call.
So he's like at the park, and he's like, I'm at the Eiffel Tower.
Yep.
There's an element of it too, where it's like, it would have been 11 p.m. in France, maybe even midnight, depending on, I'm not a perfect expert on time zones, but I remember having to like triangulate that with my own parents, and it was like, if I called around dinner, I would catching them right after breakfast.
Yeah, so the next call is at 4:18, and I think that would be close to midnight in Paris. Yeah, so this call is 4:18. This is literally right before the candle vigil starts. which means that everyone's
She makes
there.
a second call less than an hour later.
Yep.
Okay.
Baby,
Yes.
Amber.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah, hey.
Oh my goodness. That's
I found a quiet place. Pretty good, huh?
That's really good. Oh my god. It's like been all this crazy static and stuff. I'm like, so frustrated.
I know I've been trying to solve it. Working. Amber?
Yes?
Amber?
Oh,
Oh, stop. Amber.
I'm right.
Amber, are you there?
Yes.
Amber?
I can hear you.
Hey.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I'm talking.
Okay, I'm like, stay still or something.
I know. I'm going to make it work.
How was your New Year's?
What's that?
How was your New Year?
It's good. I'm just, everyone's in this bar now, so I came out about an hour. Quiet alley. Is that nice?
Yeah, it is. I can hear you. Very good.
It's pretty awesome. Fireworks and everything. The Eiffel Tower. There's some people all playing American pop songs.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty funny.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you guys decided to go out. Who?
Oh, definitely.
I can never remember your friend's name. I know Jeff, but you always say, Swans.
This is Suave, and then we have Pasquale, a friend of ours.
Pasquale.
Huh? Oh, he's a...
When did Beauty and the Beast come out?
And then he asks her what his New Year's resolution should be.
He's like, Pascal, baguette, and chip.
Exactly. She's like, what are your friends' names? And he's like, Francois and Pasquale.
I love how she's like, I don't know what information the police might find useful. I became part of this caper 48 minutes ago.
Yeah,
but let's start getting names or
Yeah,
something.
literally.
Good for you, Amber.
So if you
Good for
couldn't
you.
catch that, it's a little staticky. Amber says, how was your New Year's? He says, pretty awesome. Fireworks there in the Eiffel Tower. Everyone's here at this bar now. She says, I can never remember your friends' names. He laughs and says it's Francois. And then we have Pasquale, a friend
Francois. His name's France.
Francois and Pasquale. That's how he pronounces it. Pasquale, a friend of ours from Spain, came up. Oh, he's there too, Pasquale. Yeah. And then the earlier one that I played, the 3:00 one, was, hey, Happy New Year, I finally caught you. Near the Eiffel Tower. New Year's celebration is unreal. It's a big crowd. It's huge. Amber, I miss you. I'll see you soon.
So the candlelight vigil is on New Year's Eve? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he's calling his mistress from the candlelight vigil for his missing wife and 8-month-old child, or 8-month pregnant wife.
It's so uncomfortable to listen to. It is not necessarily indicative of
No,
any
it's not.
crime.
It's just disgusting.
Like, if I were to listen to that, I'd be like, oh yeah, he definitely sped illegally 20 minutes ago, right? Like, there's no way to, like,
No.
identify a specific crime.
Exactly.
But it is, time and place, human behavior-wise, deeply odd.
Yes.
And in that way, super concerning and, like...
Super strange. Yeah. So that's
and then
that.
he's like, okay, bye. And then candlelight vigil.
Yeah. Let's listen to my mom cry about my missing wife. Yeah. Yeah. So that's really
And it's
fun.
almost like, hear me out. I'm now, can I put a little bit of conspiracy
yeah.
brain on for just like half a second?
I'm just not going to tell you how,
Good,
how
thank
it's
you.
right or wrong.
Because in my mind, I'm like, there are like now two routes to human emotion and expression there, right? It's either one, this is so callous. He like definitely did it, which I think is the obvious one on its surface. Or second, he's so confident in his innocence that he is already moving on, but had moved on
Yeah.
before. And also that moving on involved moving on from an unborn child that was 8 months old. And at that point probably had like a name and
Connor,
like a
yep.
nursery.
A nautical themed nursery, in case you're wondering.
Not a Parisian one.
Aw.
As I said it, I was like, this might be in
That's
poor
dark.
taste.
Yeah. So that's what that happens. As a reminder, no one knows about Amber yet. The police
Right.
are keeping this very close to the chest. Not even the family has been told about Amber.
Okay.
So these recordings have not been released.
And I'm
to
sure
the
they're
media.
like, Amber, do not tell anybody. It'll blow this
Yes,
lead.
absolutely. So back to the investigation, back to the media. The police are searching Berkeley Marina religiously. They are pretty convinced that's where they're going to find the bodies.
Oh, that he dumped her.
That he dumped her in the marina. And so they're using sonar, they're using divers. Unfortunately,
What was the name of it? Brooklyn Island?
Berkeley Marina, it's part of the San
he
Francisco
went to
Bay.
an island at one
It's called
point.
Brooks Island.
Brooks Island, okay.
What I learned through some of my research is that the like tidal waves and like velocity and all that in that area is actually pretty treacherous, and so it's pretty hard to search that area actually. So at this point, the media is on a bit of a rampage since they don't have any new information. Nothing new has come up. The media starts reporting, totally baseless, but the media starts reporting that Scott may have played a part in the disappearance of Kristen Smart. Do you know that one?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking
you're
at
good.
where Brooks Island was.
Yeah, you're good. I'll show you a map too in a second.
I just found it.
Yeah.
So they're now searching around Brooks Island to try to see if they can find a body.
Yep.
And now they believe, and you're right, it is part of the sea.
Yeah.
Like Brooks Island is eventually,
Is part of the San Francisco Bay.
right.
Yep.
And then they now start to believe he might also be connected to what?
So the police don't believe this. The media starts spewing this, that he might have been involved in the disappearance of Kristen Smart. If you don't know the disappearance of Kristen Smart, this is one of the other ones that I confuse with the Scott Peterson case because of the location. Kristen Smart went missing in December of '96 at Cal Poly, the same school that Scott went to. And she went missing after a party. She basically was walking home with some people and then was never seen again. This was a cold case for a really, really long time. Like, even if you listen to a lot of podcasts that were released even 5 years ago, they won't know that this case was solved.
Okay.
So this is one of the cases I confused with Lacey Peterson due to the proximity and the time frame. It was actually solved very recently because of the attention from a podcast called Your Own Backyard, which if you haven't yet, it's very well done. It's by Chris Lambert, and it's an investigative journalist kind of podcast. And you follow him through like trying to get the cops more interested in the case, talking to the family, talking to the suspects, talking to potential witnesses. And Paul Flores had pretty much always been a suspect in the case, but they never had any like forensic evidence.
Okay.
The police really, really bungled the initial investigation. Like, there's this one example where they let people clear out the dorm room that he was in when it should have been sealed off.
Right.
But cadaver dogs alerted to the entire area, like repeatedly and consistently, and they can't do anything with cadaver dogs because it's not really, like, it is something that you can present in court, but it's not like direct evidence.
Okay.
And so it went cold for a really long time. Paul was convicted in March of 2023.
Because they found forensics evidence or something.
Eventually, yeah. They ended up
That's like
finding
just barely over
remains.
a year ago.
Yeah, it's very recent. So this was
Was
a
Paul
cold
Flores
case.
a student at the school at the time?
He was the last person to see her walking home.
Did they find a motive?
He was just a skeevy dude. There's a lot that went
was
into
just like,
that.
okay.
Yeah. It is a really interesting case. The whole Flores family is really weird. Yeah, I won't go into more because it's really creepy, but I
Right.
find it
and
interesting.
a whole separate
but
podcast.
Yeah.
So Scott and Lacey.
So they think that Scott may have had something to do with it because he went to Cal Poly and was maybe in the area around the time.
Right.
This has no basis in reality. The police did not find any connections between Scott and Kristen Smart, and he was not, at the point that they started naming him as a suspect in Kristen Smart's case, the media did, he was not even officially named as a suspect in his own wife's disappearance yet. By the
Okay.
police. Like, the police are like,
But
you're
like the
weird.
media is like, he's a master killer who's done several now.
And now he's a serial killer. Yeah, which is like a whole thing. Kristen was from Stockholm, California, which is 40 minutes from Modesto as well. So
Okay.
she's from like a nearby area.
Sure.
So just to give you like an idea of like the audacity of the media in this case. January 14th. So we're now in the next month, in the next year. Police receive word that the National Enquirer are going to publish a photo of Scott and Amber,
Okay.
which is information that they...
Oh shit! Sorry.
Yeah, Scott
yep.
and
Okay.
Amber.
Yep. Okay.
Not Lacey.
So when is this photo getting published then?
I think within the next like 10 days or
So
ish.
early January
Yes.
2003.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the National Enquirer is really like, we're about to do this. It might fuck with your case. Thought you should know. And so the police are like, fuck.
Why would you do
Yeah,
that?
really,
Okay.
like, why would you do that? And so the police are like, well, we got to get ahead of that.
Right.
Especially since they hadn't even told the family about Amber yet.
Right.
And so January 24th, this is still before the National Enquirer was going to post that, the police host...
But now almost a month after her disappearance.
Yep. A month exactly. The police host a press conference with no warning to the media and no, like, inkling to the media as to what it was about. So...
Had they told the families by this point?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe they told them right before or something like that. I don't know. But you can watch the press conference. It's, like, very readily available. And you can see Amber Fry recounts that she was, like, literally in the midst of a panic attack while she's giving...
sure.
The police
Yeah,
had
yeah,
written
yeah.
a statement for her, but she's still, like, very clearly unwell. She basically says, I have been dating Scott Peterson. The affair started on November 20th. I'm so sorry to the family.
I didn't know anything.
I didn't know. Like, he told me he was single.
Right.
After this, the Rochas, Lacey's family, instantly turn on Scott.
Yeah, I bet they do.
Yeah. I mean, still no forensic evidence, remember. It's just the fact that Scott was cheating on her. Sharon's first response when asked about this
Sharon
afterwards
being Lacey's mom. Okay.
was, quote, why did he have to kill her?
Oh.
Yeah. At this point, the volunteers of the community shut down all of their centers because they feel betrayed by Scott, obviously.
Yeah.
And the media attention on Scott escalates both in person and on air. There's a clip of him trying to load stuff into his truck, and there's reporters shouting through, like, a bullhorn saying, nobody I've run into believes your story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think this is probably a better time to mention this than whenever else I had this. The prosecution does find that Scott had probably 2 other affairs during the marriage.
Not just Amber.
Not
Amber is just
just
the most
Amber.
recent one.
There is one, they will not release her name,
Okay.
that started probably right after the wedding.
Oh, like right away.
Yeah.
Which is actually because in some ways it actually makes the whole Amber thing then less suspicious if it's a pattern of behavior that's been happening
Forever.
long before. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it also makes it more suspicious. I want to make that too.
yeah.
But there is an argument for the defense to make where it's like, while an unfortunate thing that happened internally within this marriage, not actually indicative that this was the thing that was going to then change his relationship to his wife.
Yes, exactly.
2 other affairs at least.
I think it was just 2. I mean, they'd only been married for
2
5 years.
and then Amber, or 2
2
with
and then Amber.
So 3 in total.
Yes, and
Okay.
then they did get one of Scott's ex-girlfriends from right before he met Lacey, and apparently they broke up like a week before him and
Oof.
Lacey started dating, which is
Okay.
also just like weird.
Tough turnaround.
And then he would go to the restaurant that she worked in and sit in her section.
Boo.
Yeah, gross.
And should be illegal.
Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, absolutely should be illegal. So on January 25th, this is just after, or the day after the press conference, there's a call between Scott and Amber. I'm just going to read the calls to you now because they're all staticky and
Okay.
weird.
But
And
they're
also,
still being recorded by Amber.
there are about 29 hours of
Oh
recordings.
my God.
by
I
the
forget
end of
that
it.
it's, again, 2003.
Yeah.
So there's, like, not really any texting. Again, you babies, you have no idea what we went through.
Yeah.
And also, what you could get away with your parents. I want to make sure that's super clear. Mom, you're just, like, not really coming clear right now. And then
Yeah.
your mom would, like, so let's say you're my mom. I'd be
Yeah.
like, Mom, you're just, like, not
Hello?
really coming through right now. Like,
Hello?
Sorry, Mom, I can't.
Grant?
Are you there?
Grant?
It says it's connected. I don't know. Guys, no, wait 1 second. Okay, Mom, well, if you can hear me, I'll just call you
Grant?
back later tonight. We're good. Let's go.
That was
Like,
amazing. Yeah.
such a beautiful time.
Yeah.
To be a teenager.
I wish I was a teenager at that time.
You missed it.
I know,
Maya,
I
want you to
did.
know, you missed it.
My mom got to see all my texts. Tragedy. Okay, so I want to note, I think there was a call that happened just before this. Maybe it was early January, where Scott is like being... There's multiple calls where he's being like this, but it's like very sexual in nature, where he's like,
Okay.
I like miss your like kisses and I can feel your body. And it's like,
Even
Gross.
when things are going great for me and someone else, I'm like, I hate this. Do not say this out loud.
Yeah.
Say it maybe to me in person, but do not make
But
me
also
read
don't
it.
make eye contact
Listen,
with me when
listen,
you say
if I
it.
am reading something you have sent me, 80% chance it's in 2 locations. At a red light in town somewhere or in the bathroom.
Yeah, on the toilet. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
I don't know if you think I'm like draped in lace on my couch being like,
I do look good.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like solid chance
What am I wearing?
pooping
No
or
pants.
ordering Starbucks
Yeah.
in the drive-thru.
Yes.
Like
Okay, so, but flash forward to January 25th, the day after the press conference. There's a call between Scott and Amber. Also, previous to this press conference, Scott actually did come clean to Amber. I think it was like January 9th-ish.
what do you mean
calls her.
comes clean to Amber?
Says, I think what he says is, well, you clearly haven't been watching the news. I lied to you. I have a wife and she's missing.
That's what he admits
Yes,
to.
he admits to the fact that he's
The
been
entire
married.
last month, I have not been in Europe with Francois and Pasquale.
Squall, yeah. And then basically every call they have after that, because they do keep talking, is her trying to get him to slip up
Okay.
after that. So this is January 25th, after she's come forward. And so Scott says, so did you call them and say, I want to do a press conference? And then she says, no, my God, I had CBS parked outside my business. CBS just pounded me, so that's why I did it. That's why this had to be held. He says, it sounds weird, but I was so proud of you when you did that. You have an amazing character. I pulled over and threw up when you cried. I was listening to the radio. And
You're
she
right.
says,
That does sound weird to hear.
it really sounds strange.
Sounds weird.
Yeah, so Scott then decides that he wants to make a public appearance to, quote, help find his wife. He agrees to do 4 interviews against the advice of his lawyers, 1 on GMA with Diane Sawyer, and 3 on local stations from his house. And it should be noted, you have the right to not perjure yourself, and Scott
Right.
said, try me.
You have the right to not go on Nancy Grace.
Well, not Nancy Grace, Diane
Sure.
Sawyer, but I mean, oh my God, can you imagine?
Yeah. Oh, an actual journalist?
yeah.
Who knows how to do a leading line of questioning? Okay. Not saying Nancy Grace doesn't, but like Diane Sawyer, like
Diane Sawyer is like
journalist.
the big wig,
Yes.
yeah. And so the lawyers were like, please don't. That can be used in court. And
They
he
were
was like,
there's actually so little good that would do, and you could absolutely blow this whole thing.
we actually wouldn't even let you testify if we went to court right now.
Right,
so why would
exactly.
we want you to go on live international television? So he does these interviews. The media analyzes every twitch of his face,
they
every
do.
turn of phrase, every movement, because they're all convinced that he did this and trying to find something to get him on. The thing that really gets him in the court of public opinion and in the media, and I'm not going to say this incriminates him because truthfully, I get it, he uses the past tense to refer to Lacey. And everyone's like, that means he knows that she's dead.
She's gone.
And I'm like, yeah, that could be some subconscious inkling, or that could be that he hasn't seen her in a month.
Right.
You know, like,
And
could
there's
be a
like
lot of
certainly
things.
not a lack of coverage about how much she is missed.
Yes.
Or how curious everyone is about where she is.
Yes. So as soon as he does that, basically everyone stops listening to any interview. They were like, yeah, he did it for sure. So he claims to Diane Sawyer that Amber coming out as public resulted in suspicion on him rising. And so because of that, the search for Lacey has stopped. And so he wants to address that, yes, he has not been a great husband, but they need to keep looking for Lacey. That the police are not really doing their due diligence in trying to find her. And so he also tells Diane Sawyer that he told the police about the affair right away on the 24th.
He says that he told the police right away? Mm-hmm. Okay.
He also says that he told Lacey in early December and that she was upset, obviously, but it wasn't anything that was going to end their relationship. And that's that. February 10th passes. That was Lacey's due date. So tragic, obviously, for everyone. I'm pretty sure he went golfing, which not a good look, but I mean, like, it's his pastime. I get it. March 20th, 2003, the Iraq War starts. Soldiers were even interested in the Peterson case. There's one journalist that says she had friends that were like in Iraq that had like found a way to contact her and like ask her for updates on the case. Yeah, and so like they were even interested.
Crazy what life was like before really ubiquitous internet.
Really true. So April 12th, there's a big storm that causes heavier than normal waves in San Francisco Bay. And I will provide a trigger warning. I'm about to describe the bodies. So if you don't want to hear that, maybe skip forward like a minute or two. April 13th, the body of an infant is found on the bay of San Francisco. April 14th, there's a police press conference. At 11 a.m., a dog walker reported a badly decomposed body.
Oh.
So a body had been found, literally just a body, the torso, essentially. There was the hands, feet, and head were missing. They were not able to ID it due to the condition of the body. They think it was female, but they were not really even able to tell that just based on looking. The body was found with barnacles growing on the bones, wearing tan pants. A piece of duct tape adhered to the pants on the right thigh of the body. The infant's body was found to be less decomposed than the adult body, and that the infant's body was found with some twine wrapped around the neck and electrical tape taping the ear forward. That's all.
Oof.
So here is a map. This is Berkeley Marina,
Okay.
Brooks Island,
Okay.
where Connor was recovered, where Lacey was
Do
recovered.
they use DNA to verify that that's Connor and
They
Lacey?
are able, it'll happen in a couple days, but this is
Okay.
where the bodies are recovered.
And they're identified via DNA testing to
I
be...
think it's DNA or I don't know how they
Okay.
did it back then.
But it's confirmed.
It's confirmed that those are the two bodies.
Okay.
Yep. So at this point, a judge signs an arrest warrant for Scott, but says like
Upon the appearance of the bodies.
I think what they say is like, this is the arrest warrant. Like, execute this once the IDs come back as positive, because they
Okay.
don't want the police to have to waste any time.
Right.
And so the police are like, great, we'll get a tail on him and just wait until that ID comes through. And then once it comes through, like, we got him. So where is Scott? He is primarily in San Diego, which is where his parents live. But it makes the police nervous because it's close to the border.
Right.
And
right.
So
Okay.
yeah, the police are following Scott around, and Scott thinks it's the media. So he's like
Dipping
annoyed.
it.
He's
Yeah.
he's driving erratically, trying to get rid of them. And the police, and he's supposed to meet, I think, his family somewhere, and he doesn't want to bring the media there. And so he's trying to get rid of them before he goes to meet his family. Unfortunately, the way he's driving leads the police to think he's a flight risk.
Right.
And so they execute the warrant early after he pulls into a golf course. They search his car. They find $15,000 in cash, camping gear, 4 cell phones, his brother's ID, a dozen Viagra, and a picture of him and Lacey. And Scott had dyed his hair and facial hair blonde. This is a picture of what he looked like upon arrest.
Okay. I mean, that's a weird series of things.
Yep, for sure.
4 cell phones?
Yes. He has an explanation for most. I don't know what the explanation for the 4 cell phones was,
Okay.
but they say that he had an explanation for everything. Apparently, the $15,000 was a payback from his mother, who had borrowed a lot of money and then had like taken out the cash, and it was Good Friday, I think. So someone pointed out that the banks might have been closed, which is why he had kept it.
Okay.
Still weird to keep that amount of cash
Yeah.
on you. He was also driving a new car. He had traded in his truck for a red Mercedes.
Like a sports car?
Yeah, but also if you're trying to be less conspicuous,
Right, that's easy to spot.
why? I mean, like, I get trading a new car if you're going to run, but the camping gear, apparently he had just had in his car for a while and just never taken out. His brother's ID he had because he could get a discount, I think at the golf course or something, if he used his brother's ID for whatever reason. And then people also argued that his dyed hair made it seem like a disguise, but there's actually a press photo of him talking to police back when he still had the truck in Modesto with the new hair. So if he's trying to disguise himself, he's not
Right.
really
He's like
doing...
already been in front of the media as this.
Unless he's like not thinking like that. I don't know. So while they're driving back to Modesto, the positive IDs on the bodies come back. The detectives in the car with him note that he didn't have much of a reaction in finding out that his dead wife and unborn baby had just washed up. Scott's point of view is that he he was emotional, didn't want the detectives to get any emotional reaction out of him.
Okay. Well, and if he was using past tense to describe them earlier, then the idea of them being deceased has already entered something that he is thinking about accepting, or at least the way he's talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Scott pleads not guilty. He is defended by Mark Garagos, who's actually a pundit on Larry King. He was like one of the only ones on Larry King who defended him through all of this, which is why his parents were like, "You're the one." And then Mark was like, "Okay, give me $1 million," and they were like,
Right.
"We'll make it work." And
Wait,
so
for reals?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At this point, the defense team and Scott's family have no idea what the police have on him. Because he's pled guilty and the court proceedings are starting, the prosecution hands over 30,000 pages of discovery.
He's pled not guilty.
Not guilty.
And 30,000 pages of discovery.
Yep. So now we're going to get into my analysis so far, my little rat brain thoughts, as well as a few more things that are discovered in the investigation.
Okay.
I'm going to list out the things that are found in investigation first, I guess, and then we can talk. So the timeline when him and Amber start their relationship is really important. The day after Sean Sibley confronts Scott about having a wife, potentially,
Right.
the 7th through 8th of December, Scott begins looking into buying a boat. And they find this out through internet history.
Okay.
He's searching things like boat plus ramp plus Pacific, boat plus ramps plus Watsonville plus Pacific, San Francisco Bay plus boat plus ramp. He's also searching things related to Berkeley Marina, Brooks Island, nautical charts for the San Francisco Bay, velocity maps for currents in San Francisco Bay.
Okay.
Not a good look.
So
December.
the boat's very new.
The day that Scott confesses to Amber that he has had a wife, but she's gone, is the same day Scott pays $1,400 in cash for this small boat. December 14th is the day that Scott attends the holiday party with Amber. It's also the same day Lacey attends a holiday party alone. And this is the photo that they put side by side with him and Amber at
She
their
just looks
holiday
so
party.
sweet and
She
kind
does.
and happy to be there and loving her pregnancy.
I know. Yeah. December 20th, Scott buys a 2-day fishing license for December 23rd and 24th only. And honestly, I'm just gonna start telling you my little rat brain thoughts now. That's weird because he changed his plans at the last minute to go fishing. Theoretically.
Right. That's what he
was
shared
supposed
initially.
to go golfing.
Gonna go golfing. Now I'm gonna go fishing.
Yeah.
Almost like he decided that I'm gonna go golfing is gonna be my alibi, and then he chickened out on that as an alibi, and he was like, I should just tell people I'm fishing.
going fishing. Yep. There will be some claims that Lacey did not know about the fishing boat. Those will be disproven.
Okay.
So she knows about the fishing boat. There is a lot of day of suspicious activity that we can talk about. Let me see what else I want to talk about. Yeah, I already talked about the other affairs. Oh, Scott got a P.O. box specifically to accept letters from Amber a few days before Lacey went missing.
Okay.
Which is weird because why would you do that if you know that your wife's going to be gone soon? What's the point?
That's also true. Like,
Yeah.
I can just get these letters at the house.
2 weeks after Lacey's disappearance, Scott orders the Playboy channel. 4
Okay.
days later, he orders a more hardcore channel called X Ecstasy, which is weird
Gross.
because
Sorry.
if your wife is...
It's just gross to hear
No,
it.
yeah, it's true. But also, like, if your wife is missing and she's been kidnapped and she comes home to you and she sees the cable bill and she's like, why is this what you were thinking about while I was gone?
Sure.
So it's like, it almost feels like he knows that she's not coming home, but
I don't read it that way. I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
I don't read it that way.
He's just not thinking.
I think men are gross. I think men are gross, and that is closer to the front of their mind
that's
than
fair.
I think many of
Women.
us even acknowledge.
Fair. And then on the GMA interview, he says that he told the police right away. That is not true. We have the tapes from that first interview that he has with
that
the
he
cops.
did not tell them about Amber right away.
But also, the police the police don't necessarily ask if he's having an affair.
Sure.
Like, they ask if there's any problems in the relationship, and if he genuinely believes there's no problems in the relationship,
Right, because apparently Lacey was like upset, but it wasn't going to end the relationship.
then it's like I can see. But also, like, if you hear problems in a relationship, I feel like affair is like the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. So these are the day of suspicious activities that I think. The sudden change of plans from the golf course to the marina is weird. You can't say it's too cold to golf and then go fishing.
To the ocean.
Yeah, that's weird. Even the people that like run that marina said that there was only 3 people total that came to the marina that day because it was such a bad day.
San Francisco Bay is super cold a lot of times, especially though in the winter.
And I think it was like drizzly too, and so a lot of people also point to him washing his clothes immediately when he gets home as a weird thing, but he says he worked with chemicals a lot in the warehouse, so it's not uncommon for him to come home and just like immediately throw
wash
his
it,
clothes in the wash. Yeah. So the other thing is that the marina's an hour and a half away, and you're gonna go an hour and a half away and not let your 8-month pregnant wife know that you're about to be an hour and a half away. Like, hey, if you go into early labor, don't call me because I'm not around.
Sure.
Feels weird. The 2-day fishing license is weird. This is a map of where his warehouse is
right.
and where the marina is. It's an hour and a half, basically, an hour 22 minutes. At the marina, he only had freshwater fishing equipment. He only had equipment that would in the court case. There's a fishing expert that will testify. The rods, jigs, all of that stuff that he had
Is for like a lake.
Is
not
for a
the
lake
ocean.
for freshwater bass, and he says that he was trying to catch. I don't know. Oh man, I have it on the tip of my tongue. It's not a fish that he can catch with what he has. Also, Lacey mopping is weird to me because the housekeeper came the day before, and they're not expecting company, and she's 8 months pregnant.
Sure, unless like she spilled something while cooking, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's true. If I were a husband, and granted he's proven himself to be a shitty husband, I'd be like, babe, no, like I'll do that.
He doesn't seem to be an equal caretaker of the home.
Yes, and also asking her to go pick up something he volunteered to pick up, the Vila Farms gift basket, feels suspicious to me. Like, again, you're just a bad husband. And also in the call, he timestamps himself, like you mentioned. It feels like he's preemptively finding an alibi.
Here's where I am at this time.
Oh, the other thing they find that I forgot to put in my earlier notes, while Scott's taking a shower early in the morning before he leaves, someone accesses the Peterson home computer and searches for women's clothes and sunflower umbrellas.
Wait, while he's showering back at the house?
Before he, like, leaves, like, in the morning.
Okay.
There is, yeah.
And they're searching women's clothes and what else?
Sunflower patio umbrellas, I think. Her whole family says that she loves sunflowers.
Okay.
I don't know. It's also December, so I don't, whatever. Not coming home until 4:30 when there's a dinner starting is just another thing, but honestly, I can see men doing that in general.
Men absolutely do that.
The patio umbrellas themselves drive me nuts because he loaded patio umbrellas into the trunk of the car to take to the warehouse.
Right.
He then never unloads them despite loading tools into the truck, despite hooking up a boat, despite getting to the marina, unhooking the boat, rehooking up the boat, and taking everything back to the warehouse. He at no point is like, I should probably take those umbrellas.
So the umbrellas go to the bay, they come back to the warehouse, and then do they stay at the warehouse, or do they come all the way back home?
Come all the way back home.
Okay.
Yeah. The prosecution's theory is that that's where Lacey is.
Right, one of the umbrellas
hidden in the umbrellas. The other big thing I want to talk about is the reported dog walking sightings.
Okay.
Because this is a huge thing in the documentary, so I'm going to talk about this now and not talk about it when we get into the trial, because I got really annoyed hearing about it over all of the sources that I listened to. In the documentary, the entire family is like pissed off that the dog walk sightings never got brought into court.
Okay.
Because essentially those dog walking sightings would prove that she was alive after Scott left.
Right. And that while he was weird and a loner and off doing things you maybe shouldn't do on Christmas Eve with your wife 8 months pregnant, it does prove that he didn't do it.
That he didn't kill her, yeah.
Is anyone working at the warehouse? I guess, sorry, that's
No,
not the
it's just
question.
him. Yeah,
Okay.
I think. There's about a dozen sightings of a very pregnant woman with a dog the morning of the 24th. The reason that these don't get brought to court, as the prosecutor's analysis showed, that there were so many sightings of a pregnant woman walking a dog that the prosecution could have easily brought in someone that knew that they did not see Lacey. Because they had brought in people that had seen Lacey and showed them a picture of Lacey, and they were like, that's absolutely not her.
Oh, that's not the lady I saw walking the dog.
So even if people did see Lacey, there are other people that said that they saw a pregnant woman, and there are other pregnant women in the area
Right.
that walk dogs that actually did get brought into court that were like, yeah, I'm pregnant and I walk my dog. Or like, yeah, I also have a golden retriever and I also walked that morning. So it's super easy to discredit them.
But even just one person being like, I know for a fact I saw Lacey and she was alive at 11 a.m.
None of them knew that it was
is like
Lacey.
a huge... Right, but that's an alibi builder for
It is
Scott.
an alibi builder. Here is the stuff that they don't mention in the documentary. Or here's the stuff that they do mention. They mention that the dog walk sightings would map, that they think were actually Lacey, map out about a 45-minute walk.
Okay.
And that is the amount of time, Scott's sister-in-law says that is the amount of time Lacey would normally walk. However, what the prosecutor's podcast points out, as evidence that was presented in trial, or at least presented at some point, early in October, Lacey had tried to walk to the park and had gotten so sick she vomited and passed out, and had gotten so embarrassed because people had to help her. Lacey's doctor, after this incident, had advised her to take it easy after Lacey had told her about it, about dizziness and exhaustion. The doctor basically said, stop walking the dog, or
Shorter
do
walks.
it later in the day
okay.
when you're hydrated. Lacey's prenatal yoga instructor had seen her December 20th and reported that Lacey was in so much pain and so uncomfortable she could not even walk to her car by herself after the appointment.
Oh, wow.
And the shoes that she usually wore for walks were still found in the house. So you're going to tell me that this woman, who can't even walk to her car after a prenatal yoga appointment, which is not even, it's just mostly just breathing,
Sure.
is going to walk 45 minutes alone? It just doesn't really make sense.
I hear everything you're saying. And I think also, now you're like, am I a defense attorney? Am I the prosecutor? I'm in the jury. I'm like, what you have is a weird day. But a day that we have pretty well documented.
Yeah.
But there's no forensics evidence
None.
to link him to the murder.
Yep.
And additionally, I haven't really heard a clear-cut motive yet,
No.
Because it doesn't even sound like Amber was move in with me or we're done. It doesn't sound like there was a huge payout in terms of life insurance or anything like that.
There was a life insurance policy that was taken out the year prior, but I think they interviewed the life insurance advisor, and even they said that it was Lacey's idea to get the life insurance and everything, so that didn't seem like a reasonable motive. Yeah.
I guess it now raises the question, in our more modern era of criminal justice, do you need a clear-cut motive and or forensic science to prove someone guilty?
Yeah.
Because, Brooks Island is part of that bay where the two bodies were identified and found. But also at the same time, Brooks Island in that bay, Berkeley Bay, right, is kind of the closest large body of water to where they lived.
There's a lot of lakes, though.
Is there? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean...
It's really hard.
It's the issue is the evidence that we are presented nowadays is evidence that 100 years ago would have locked someone away forever.
Yeah.
But now we're but so much stuff can get explained away by human behavior that something as official as a conviction feels like it needs to have a little bit of science to it.
Of all of this evidence that I've mentioned so far, I think the most incriminating thing is the 2-day fishing license.
Sure.
That's the weirdest part to me that
But
I
I
can't
can even see a
explain.
guy just being bad at fishing and not knowing what he's doing.
He grew up fishing.
Okay.
The two things that Lee raised him on were golf and fishing. which was something that I didn't know because people were saying Lee was bad or Scott was really bad at fishing. And then I listened to another podcast, I think it was Crime Weekly, that did a deep dive into his family history. Apparently the police tried to find any record of violence in Scott's history, and the next closest thing that they could find of violence was not related to him. His maternal grandfather had been murdered.
Okay.
That's it.
So they don't really have a clear motive.
Nope.
Or a clear reason or scientific evidence. Do they even have a theory as to how...
Yeah.
Okay, are you about to share that next? What is their
yeah.
theory as to how...
I'm going to go through... I have one more piece that I want to go through.
Right.
Jury selection, which is sus, and then I'll
Cool.
talk about their
Because
their
obviously,
theories.
like, if they believe Scott is guilty of Lacey's murder, they need to present some kind of theory as to how he murdered her.
The trial is honestly the most, like, ridiculous thing.
Okay,
it's
well, I'm
like,
here for
it's
it.
crazy, yeah. Okay, so...
Really funny episode that we've had so far. Really...
Absolutely crazy. I just...
just the laughs.
See,
Well, I've
friend or
laughed.
foe?
Oh, okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Kind of actually completely forgot there was a theme.
Thank
Yes,
you.
okay.
I feel... When you said friend or foe, I was like... Okay, so...
And I was like, let me talk to you about eco-terrorism.
and I was like, let me talk to you about
Sure,
this
whatever.
murder.
Exactly.
So...
Murder in the part of the country I was just vacationing in. How
You're
fun.
welcome.
Thanks.
So this is the other piece that really kind of gets me. It's very confusing. You'll remember I told you it's important what she's wearing.
Right.
Because Lacey's body was found with tan pants,
Okay.
which is what her sister said she was wearing the night of the 23rd.
Okay.
Scott said when he left in the morning, she was wearing a white blouse, black pants. Her body is found with tan pants. All of the dog walk reportings that came after the missing persons announcement all said she was wearing white blouse, black pants. Which is another reason I kind of discredit those, because it seems more like a Mandela effect.
Okay.
Like, someone may have seen her.
Sure.
But I think that they were like, well, that woman was clearly her.
Right.
And so the shirt...
Also, white blouse, black pants isn't necessarily the most unique.
No, it's not, but it's definitely different from tan pants.
Right.
While the shirt that she was wearing on the 23rd was found in the house, so she's not in the same outfit as the 23rd, and she does have multiple pairs of tan pants. It does prove that she was not wearing a white blouse, black pants when she went missing. Whatever happened, it's possible she was wearing a white blouse, black pants when Scott left. She changed after cleaning or whatever, but I feel like that's the biggest argument against the dog walking, unless she like got sweaty on the dog walk, came home, changed. It's just like a weird fact.
Because all of
right?
us are assuming that she got abducted at some point on the dog walk.
Yes, exactly.
She comes home, there's a robbery happening across the street. Hey, what are you guys doing? Mm-hmm. It turns south very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, that had been,
Yeah.
I think, the other possible scenario.
Yeah. Okay, so jury selection. The trial is obviously moved away from
Wait, hold
Modesto.
on. So what is the... Are you going to get to how they think they...
Yeah. After jury selection, yeah. Jury selection, the trial's moved to Redwood City, which is actually between Modesto and San Francisco, which
Right.
is, a lot of people argue, like, not actually solving any problems, because
No.
San Francisco's the media hub, and so,
Right.
like, whatever. They went from trying to find people who didn't think Scott was guilty to just trying to find people who said they could give Scott a fair trial.
Okay.
Which, yikes. 50% of the jury pool was dismissed right off the bat because they thought Scott was guilty. Also, the judge was asking the question, would you apply the death, or do you believe in the death penalty? Because he's up for the death penalty. This
Right.
is first-degree murder.
In the early 2000s.
Yes, and so he's saying, do you believe in the death penalty? If they said no, they were out. What he should have been asking is, will you apply the law with the facts of this case?
Oh, so they were essentially filtering out...
People that don't care about the death penalty.
Right. Who might be more empathetic or more malleable or whatever you want to attach to that.
You end up with a very select group of people.
Right. People who are willing to give him a chance but are also
Yes.
willing to send them to death.
Yeah, so that's a big issue with the jury selection. Here's a quote from juror number 5, Justin Falconer. He said, quote, "Once I found out that it was the Scott Peterson trial, I went home and Googled it." Yeah, you're right. They didn't sequester them for a 5 to 6 month trial. No one was sequestered. It was all on the honor system. They wouldn't listen to media, wouldn't talk to people about it, wouldn't Google anything, which I don't trust people. And even if you can go on a documentary,
we be knowing this, yes.
you can go on a documentary all you want and say, I didn't Google anything. I don't believe you. So no one got sequestered, and they actually kind of, I think Mark Garagos, the defense attorney, termed the phrase stealth juror as someone who gives the right answers to get on a jury. In fact, one woman was called back for second round of jury selection, was posting on the internet about how she had fooled the dumbass defense lawyer and how she couldn't wait to get on that jury and fry Scott Peterson.
Oof. Americans are absolutely wild in their application of justice sometimes.
Yeah. And so luckily someone saw that in Michigan,
Flagged
I think,
it.
and reported it, and she got kicked off of the
Haters gonna
jury.
hate.
Yeah.
I'm just over here trying to undermine the very foundation of our legal justice system, and people in Michigan don't like that.
Apparently. Jury selection lasted 9 weeks.
Oof.
Can you imagine?
No.
Once picked,
Imagine being picked like week 2 and then having to spend
And just sit there.
7 more weeks. Yeah.
waiting for them. So once picked, the bailiff told them that they could pick their own names to like be referred by, and this was really funny. This was one of the jurors that interviewed in the doc. He said he picked the name Zane, Zane, and when asked why he picked the name Zane, he said because this is insane. I would get a beer with that juror.
Who's
so
doing
fast.
drag names at a murder trial?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Trixie Mattel, and I'm the big gulp of justice you can't get.
There's another one that
Welcome.
was named Strawberry Shortcake.
No!
She becomes a big
John
player later.
Jacob Jingleheimer Smith. Those are the names you're calling with.
Yeah. Okay, so opening statements begin. I have a note here that says prosecution versus defense stories, do it from memory. So here we go.
How about that? To you, for you, by
I
you.
lost time.
We'll do it live.
So prosecution's argument is that their first argument is that Scott killed her the night of the 23rd.
Okay.
Kind of like panics. He is faking Lacey's presence. Actually, no, this is not something they know yet, so he can't talk about the internet presence. But he says, they say he killed her, strangulation, hence the no blood, strangulation on the 23rd. He loads her up into the truck under the umbrellas, goes to the warehouse, does his shit, comes to the Berkeley Marina and dumps her. He's doing this because he is tired of feeling tied down and recognizes that once he has a kid, he's stuck.
So he's doing so he commits the murder the evening of the 23rd. And then doesn't dispose of it overnight, but instead disposes of it in the morning, in the middle of the day?
Because it's fishing. So, I mean, one of the kind of suspicious things about what he did is that he's not fishing really early in the morning or really late at night. And also, if you're there super late at night, you immediately become suspicious. So doing it in the middle of broad daylight, they're like, well, he can't do anything. He's not suspicious.
Until someone sees you roll something into the ocean.
Yeah. The prosecution's argument at the beginning is not strong.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Sorry, I'm just like...
you're good. You're good.
I couldn't imagine... And then... Like, are there signs of struggle somewhere? And then, like, does he stash the body immediately in the car?
What they think is they found duffel bags pulled out. What they think happened is that Lacey found evidence of his affair.
Okay.
And she snapped and was like, fuck it, I'm leaving.
Right.
And he said, no, you're not. And
But doesn't that then get him what he wants? Doesn't sound like he cashes out a huge life insurance policy. It sounds like he's off the hook.
I don't know.
And, like, maybe gets a chance to keep the house and stuff and doesn't have to do the horrific act of murdering somebody.
Mm-hmm. You also have to... What I got from the backstory into Scott's life is that because his dad came from such a kind of a poor standing and because he is the only child of his biological mother and biological father, whereas he has other siblings, there's a lot of pressure put on him to be perfect.
Okay.
And that this represented a lot of, like, I think what they're getting at is that he essentially bottled everything up and just snapped one day. His father's always telling him he's not good enough, like with the golf thing. Like,
Right.
well, I think there's a quote from him like, well, obviously you couldn't keep up with them. Like they're way too good for you, and stuff like that. And so, like, no, I'm not trying to say it makes sense.
No,
but
I'm just
Yeah.
swallowing everything as you're giving it to
Yeah.
me. I'm also thinking like, yeah, I hear that, and I'm sure that would push a person to a point. This is a donut hole in the case for me. I'm with you on like so much stuff, but the way the two victims were murdered is not quick. Like it's horrific, right? I mean, for one, I'm sorry again. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to pause again. Content warning. If you didn't want to hear the description of the victims, I'll try to keep it light, but probably fast forward 30 seconds. When the murder initially happens, they are at least one pregnant person still holding the fetus, and when they're found, they're separate, and the fetus has been
Wait.
Oh, okay.
That has nothing to do with the murder. That has
What?
to do with the decomposition.
Oh.
What the
But
prosecution...
don't they find something around the baby's neck?
There's a lot of trash in the area, and there's
Okay.
I'll get into this in a second. There's no wounds under it.
Okay.
I'll explain it in a bit. I'll put a trigger warning before I talk about it. A brief trigger warning here. The prosecution also thinks the extra concrete that was poured, that he said was in the thing, that he made extra anchors, tied them to her hands and feet, and maybe like her neck or something. And so when it started decomposing, it broke off, and that's why we got what we got. And there's an explanation for the baby as well that I can get into in a second.
I mean, I don't need to. If you're just telling me that it was decomposition, that's enough for me. I don't need more detail there.
The baby was never born.
Yeah, right. That
For sure.
Okay.
Yes.
But also that changes then from like an extremely
It's not-
graphic
no.
crime to a different one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they think the murder happens the night of the 23rd after the phone call with so-and-so.
Sharon. Yeah.
Sharon, her sister, her mom.
Yep.
And then that he disposes of the body in the middle of the day. But they don't actually have any evidence that a murder happened in the home.
Nope.
And they don't have any evidence of him dumping the bodies anywhere. They just have a bad dude with some strange things going on that all do line up to tell a specific story, but unclear if that's the order they're supposed to line up in.
Exactly.
Phew, okay.
Yep. That's the prosecution's theory. The defense, I mean,
That's hard to vote solidly yes for.
Yes.
Maybe there's other details that I'm not getting.
we'll talk
It's like
about how the jury ended up at the decision.
it's like yes, but it's not like yes.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly,
and that's the
exactly.
difference a lot of times.
Because
with these.
if you're not familiar with court proceedings, the prosecution's case is to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
The defense's job is literally just to give you a reasonable doubt.
See, this is the thing too about like our justice system. Like,
Yeah.
how wild that they just found 14 average people living in the Bay Area, and they're like, "Hey, if you're
Decide
not
this
too
man's
busy,
fate."
yeah, we
Yeah.
just need you to kind of sit forever with the facts of this case on your soul." Like, I can't think of any better way of conducting like something like this.
No, but it's
at
just
the
a
same time,
wild way.
like no one talks about this, the random lottery that you could one day get drawn. I mean, not you obviously, because you
I know,
never get
I wanna
picked,
get on the
but
jury.
the random lottery people like me or Lydia or Danny could get one day, where it's, well, you know, if you hadn't committed all about fraud in your teenage years,
Damn it.
where it was like, hey, just so you know, in fact, actually, I'm now putting together the last piece of puzzle. Do you know what initially gave me this thought?
What?
My cousin, who lived in New York for a while,
Oh, no.
like for a decade,
Yeah.
sat on a murder trial. And I was like, what happened? What did you do? And she goes, well, I can't tell you too much, but I mean, we can share the verdict. That's public information. She didn't say the perpetrator's name, or but they're like, but no, like together we like found him guilty. And like the facts of the case and what we ultimately then had to render, like, oh, actually, I think you're gonna think about it all the time. And I was like, what? You know? It's like that first curtain where it's like Santa's not real, but the real curtain to life and adulthood is meeting someone changed forever by jury duty.
By taxes.
Anyways, so they're like, okay.
They have the jury sat.
So they have the prosecution side of it.
Yes.
Okay.
The prosecution's argument, he didn't want to be a father, he didn't want to be tied down, and instead of divorce, he murdered her on the 23rd. Okay, wait, I mixed up these notes a little bit. The prosecutor points out as evidence to their claim that Scott, in his initial interview with the police, said in that morning they were watching Martha Stewart and that she was talking about cookies and meringue or something like that.
That's what Lacey was watching in the morning? Okay.
He was like there, but the prosecutor points out that the meringue cookies episode aired on the 23rd, not the 24th.
Okay.
And so it's possible he's associating what happened around the time that he was hiding her body or doing something with her body or when he was planning a murder or whatever.
Right, when he was deciding.
Yeah, with the 23rd instead of the 24th.
He notices something and he's like, that'd be a good detail to remember.
This is the prosecution's first error because the defense then shows a tape of Martha Stewart doing an appearance on GMA on the morning of the 24th, and there is a moment where she mentions at least meringue. I'm not sure about cookies.
Okay, but they're like, for a dude who probably had done nothing to help the house, the word meringue and Martha Stewart in Good Morning America, like...
Yeah, the defense is like, that's actually false.
Right.
And you didn't do your due diligence. So therefore, they're already working on discrediting the prosecution.
Right.
And so, like, either one could be true, but, like, the prosecution fucked up in their opening
It's kind of insane just the way these details end up shaping a case where it's like, who would have thought Martha Stewart's meringue week, the week of Christmas, would be so crucial to understanding the timeline of like when and what and where and who.
Happened.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So the documentary says that this meringue incident makes the prosecution look like a fool, but the prosecutor's podcast points out that this isn't really the point. The likelihood that Scott would remember one reference as opposed to an entire episode isn't as likely. And the other point is that they're discrediting the prosecution to the jury.
So the prosecuting podcast said it just makes sense that he'd remember one detail as opposed to like a summary of the whole story.
The prosecutor's podcast gets really hung up on the fact that he remembers a lot of very specific details. Like he names the brand and store that they bought the cereal from that she's eating that morning, but forgets to get a receipt from the gas station.
Okay.
Or like other stuff like he just can't remember. And it just feels strange, but also if he's coming from a household that expects perfection,
sure,
like I can get that motivation to remember everything.
And also I really do not know where I'm...
Yeah.
I think I know where I'm leaning, but I don't know where I'm landing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, if he is innocent, then there's no reason for him to remember to get like a gas station grocery store receipt.
Exactly.
But if they like fought over whether or not they should get a rotisserie chicken and then 5 minutes later they got Kellogg's cereal, like there's a reason why they would remember like, oh no, we were at Safeway Thursday evening and I wanted this for dinner and she didn't, and fine, I said whatever, and that's also when we picked up like this and that and the other thing, you know?
It's a Trader Joe's cereal in case you're wondering.
Interesting.
So the documentary also talks about the defense's opening statement, saying that there's no forensic evidence at all, and that's all the jury needs to know, saying that because there's no hard evidence, because there's no eyewitnesses, obviously you can't convict him.
Yeah.
The prosecutors point out that most cases are circumstantial, and when innocence projects and stuff come in to prove innocence, the first thing they're going to attack is eyewitnesses, because what you remember
is so subjective.
And that's the easiest thing to attack. And
right, but defense is lying. I mean, now taking like we go to debate nationals in 3 days. Like taking a debate coach's approach to it, it's like you have no one witnessing them like dumping the bodies. You have no one witnessing the crime. You have a handful of witnesses questionably credible who witnessed seeing Miss Lacey alive. And you have no actual forensics evidence that like ties them to the case. Like there is nothing physical that connects him and them other than the bad vibes you get from this guy.
Yeah. The prosecutors do a good job of like making the point that there's a lot of cases like this.
Okay.
But a lot of times those cases have like harder evidence.
Sure. Like a fiber or something.
Yeah. And so if you don't know the difference between like direct and circumstantial evidence, the example that I heard that like solidified it in my brain is if you're like if you're hiking or in the mountains or something and you see tracks of a bear walking across like a valley, but you don't see the bear, you still know that the bear was there. That's circumstantial. And so
that's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah. The other one is like if you see someone come into the room and they're like wet and have an umbrella, you don't need to see that it's raining to know that it's raining, right?
You don't need to test the liquid to know that it's raining.
Exactly. So it's stuff like that, and what they're saying is basically like Scott had kind of a motive, like it's a shitty motive, and he had the place,
opportunity.
he had he was there when it was there, and it was like it's
and
hard.
he admits to being where the bodies are ultimately found, or at least in that vicinity, the morning that she disappears.
Yeah.
And that's a very strong link.
And that is a very strong...
See, it's like you go,
it's hard because it's like, so I'm going to read to you the statement from the defense, the opening statement from the defense. This is just like bits I could find. I found one of the podcasts I listened to had like a summary of what this was, and it was basically like, you're not going to like my client. He's a bad guy, but he's not guilty of murder. And I kept like trying to like control F, like bad guy, husband, guilty, and I couldn't find anything. And
they're like, being a douche isn't a crime. If so, we'd have snatched up all of San Francisco. A woman's been murdered.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is
that's an insane kind of like pivot of like, look at this like honky tonk guy
yes.
who does love women
a
so
lot
much,
and sex for some reason.
but that is not then criminal.
So this is the quote that I pulled that I think is where they were pulling that. So, quote, "One of the first things that I think we have to address in this case is that, as you know, as the judge read to you, he's charged with 2 counts of murder. He's not charged with abuse of Amber Frey. He's not charged with having an affair. In fact, I don't think there's going to be any dispute. I don't think there's going to be any dispute. And I told most of you that he did have an affair. There is clearly, you want to call him a cad. You want to say his behavior is boorish. We're not going to dispute that. But the fact of the matter is that this is a murder case, and there has to be evidence in a murder case." And he ends by saying, quote, "The evidence is going to show clearly, beyond any doubt, that not only is Scott Peterson not guilty, but Scott Peterson is stone cold innocent."
Okay.
So basically, if you don't know what CAD is, I had to Google it. It's just like a man that treats women poorly.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of agrees that the defense's opening statement was like, yeah, I mean, fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone is kind of like on the side that like the prosecution seems dumb, and like the defense has already pointed out that the prosecution has not done their due diligence once. So what else are they not doing their due diligence on? Clearly he's innocent. So the public opinion for the case, people were obsessed with this case. People would arrive. There was only a certain number of seats available to the public around this point. People would arrive around 5 to 6 a.m. in order to enter the lottery to win one of 26 public seats.
It's 26? Mm-hmm. It's kind of gross.
Wild. There's an internet web sleuth. I kind of love this woman. Her name is Marlene Newell.
Okay.
She's interviewed in the documentary. She was able to get in about half the time to see the trial in person because she was saving her ticket stubs from the lottery and able to like re-enter them.
Wait, what do you mean?
I don't really know.
If they're like, we pull number 27, she's like, how crazy,
cheating.
I have a number 27.
From last time? Yeah, something like that.
And that's like what gets her in.
Yeah. And so she had also attended the OJ trial and had heard from that case.
Oh, so this is like her thing.
Apparently, I don't know.
California murder trials is like her thing.
I think it's literally just OJ and Scott Peterson.
Okay.
Yeah. She had heard in that case about some evidence mishandling, so she wanted to see if this case would be judged by the public.
What do you mean wanted to see? She's not like a prosecution. She's not a prosecutor.
I don't
she's not
get
a
the
state
impression
legislature.
she had a day job.
I think she's just like, I actually formed a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And I needed to investigate it.
And I had to see. So she ends up posting on internet boards just to see, because internet boards are getting really popular around this time. And so she's starting to she wants to talk about the case with other people. And what she finds out is that people would accuse her of being in love with Scott Peterson.
Oh, of course.
For defending a murderer.
Everyone's in love or guilty of somebody else.
Yes, and she wasn't able to have any real discussions about the facts of the case.
She's like, no one else was in there day in, day out like I was.
Yeah, exactly.
Not in love with this person. And thus, there was no equal. I was most qualified.
She was like, I just wanted to talk about the facts that no one else knew because there's only 26 of us in there. So what she really saw is that once someone made up their mind on this case, it was damn near impossible to change their mind.
She saw that in the discussion boards,
yes,
you mean?
in the discussion boards. So the trial, the first 3 weeks. Experts. I divided up the discussion of the trial into like experts and who
Not
they
experts?
interviewed
Okay.
and stuff like that. So experts. There's a computer forensic expert witness who testified that 8:40 in the morning of the 24th, I wrote 23rd, it's 24th, someone is on the computer in the Peterson home looking at women's clothing and sunflower umbrellas. This implies that Scott would have had to kill her right after she was on the computer, clean everything, and figure out how to get her into the back of his truck within an hour and a half, or that he's on the computer pretending to be her.
Right, with her potentially somewhere hidden in the house.
Yes, but if that's the case, then why wouldn't he, when the cops are like, you murdered your wife, why wouldn't he then be like, well, look at the internet records. She was on the computer in the morning. She was alive, you know? And so it's like, that, I don't know if that proves anything, you know?
Interesting.
So, yeah, at this point, the prosecution's still drowning. There's a concrete expert. Wild.
You just know it's a big burly guy with like a red face.
Yeah, exactly. Who has to like keep wiping his forehead.
Too small tie, huge belly, suit from his son's graduation 5 years ago.
He can't move his shoulders.
Buzz cut.
Yeah.
I am painting a very specific portrait right now.
Yeah, so they talk about the concrete pour for the anchor and how there's a plywood board with markings of concrete on it, and you can see the like kind of voids in the powder to show that there was more than one concrete pour.
Like cylinder pour.
Yeah, and
Okay.
even if there was only one, there's a lot of concrete that was used, and where did the rest of it go? Scott says it went to his driveway area. There's a recording from the police where the police are like, how many anchors did you make? And he said one. And Scott said one. So the question becomes, where did the remaining concrete go, if not that driveway? The concrete expert testifies that the concrete that was used in that hole does not match the kind of concrete used to pour the anchor. There's several types of concrete. The one used at the driveway has way more rocks and like solid pieces in it, and the anchor one does not. And so it doesn't totally make sense. Also, why would you mix concrete somewhere and then drive it away to use it? It just feels like you would... The concrete used to where Scott says he used it actually matches the concrete that was used in other places around the home. And so it doesn't make sense. This is the photo. It's kind of hard to see. You can kind of see where the voids are that they're talking about. Like 36 and 35 are pretty clear. I feel like this one's kind of clear. There's another picture that has some of the markings better.
So this is at the warehouse.
Mm-hmm. This is a piece of plywood where he was pouring like concrete into like molds.
Is that a normal part of his job to pour concrete like that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Because that just looks like a workbench to me. Like I see the vague outlines of circles.
I think he had even told from what I gather, he told the police, like, this is where I poured the concrete. So they're not like worrying about what it was. An important thing to note, I'll talk about this towards the end. Like I said, the docuseries is very biased in Scott's favor. This concrete discussion is not mentioned in its entirety in the documentary. They mention that Scott said, I poured it here, and that it's true, there's concrete poured there, and that's the end of discussion. They don't mention a concrete expert, they don't mention anything else. There's a lot of details that are conveniently not brought up in the documentary that I thought were like interesting. And vice versa, there's a lot of information that's not brought up in the other sources. Sure.
As they paint like one narrative or the other.
Yeah, exactly. So there is an expert fisherman that testifies as well, who says Scott said he was fishing for sturgeon. That's what it was. And his rod was not capable of catching sturgeon. His rod was not equipped. The fishing line was not equipped. His bait and tackle box was not for saltwater fish. And the anchor that he had made would not even catch where he was
down
fishing.
At the bottom.
Yeah, so it did nothing. They also interviewed the detectives. After extensive research in the house, the police testified that they found no physical evidence regarding this crime. They asked Detective Brocchini if he thought it was suspicious that Scott produced a receipt from the marina, and he said yes. And then they asked, did you think it was suspicious that he didn't produce a receipt from the gas station? And he said yes. And they point out that why is
suspicious and one is also suspicious the
unless
opposite way.
You already think he's
guilty.
Yeah. The prosecution claims that Lucy doesn't know about the boat. Detective Brocchini on cross-examination, it turns out Brocchini had talked with someone in the warehouse next to Scott's who had seen Lacey at the warehouse on the 23rd, and this information seemed to be redacted from police reports for no reason.
So Lacey did know, and the police didn't think that was a convenient thing to point out.
Yes.
Which is actually kind of crazy. I don't know what their like line of thinking was there.
Thinking that he was hiding a boat from her. I don't know. So to recap, the prosecution's opening statement has an error in it. Detective Burkini has been caught in misconduct.
Right.
Jurors say at this point they remember Scott being weirdly emotionless the whole time. Jurors also remember at this point they believed pretty point blank that Scott was innocent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at this point everyone is kind of on the same page. This is where we get to week number 4.
That's what the juror says.
Yeah, they interview maybe like 5 jurors in the docuseries, and all of them were like, yeah, we think he was innocent here. Okay, so week number 4.
What does the defense do? Yeah, okay, sorry, keep going.
Week number 4, which is June 23rd, 2004. Juror number 5, Justin Faulkner, was dismissed because he had spoken to Lacey's brother, Brent, as they were passing through security one morning. They all have to kind of go through the same entry doors, the same security.
It's not a huge courthouse or anything.
Yeah, and this interaction is actually caught on camera. Justin makes a good point that the judge or bailiff or whoever had told them when asked, like, can we interact with the family and whoever, they said, yeah, like, you can, like, pass pleasantries and stuff like that. Like,
sure.
You can say, like, good morning and stuff like that. This interaction is caught on camera. You can hear Justin say something like, I'm ruining the shot for them, pointing to the news camera that's recording them, so maybe you won't be in the news today. And so...
Which you can't say, but I don't think it's nefarious.
It's
right?
not nefarious, but at the same time, like...
I'm
it's
sure
an
to a
easy
certain...
way to pass information if you're like, well, so-and-so is going to say this to you if they're leaning one way or another or something. It could, like, if you're going to be conspiracy theory about it, you absolutely can.
My, like, white guy Midwest
Yeah.
is like, I can't be in a room with the same person for a month and not be like, oh, like, sorry about that, you know? But it also does show that this person is then aware of the media coverage.
Yes.
That they are following it to a degree.
Yeah, and so a couple of the other jurors that are interviewed in the doc say that he was trying to talk to them about their opinions on the case, which they're explicitly
The
not allowed to do.
brother was trying to, or
no,
the jurors
Justin,
amongst themselves?
Jury number 5, the same one that was caught talking to the brother.
Talking to other jurors about their thoughts.
When they're like at lunch and stuff like that. And Justin, of course, still says this didn't happen and that it's like misinterpreted. But the other jurors were kind of the belief that he was trying to like exert his beliefs on them. And it was clear he thought Scott was innocent at this point. I mean, everyone did, but...
Right.
So he was very much on the defense's side. The family now uses this to say that there's some kind of conspiracy to remove him from the jury to get a guilty verdict. So the judge ousts him. Justin Faulkner then is not quiet following this.
Oh, shit. Okay.
He goes
I'm sure they told him to be quiet, though, right? Like, while the prosecution's going on.
Well, after he's ousted. After he's not... Yeah,
but
I'm
still,
not sure.
you're probably not supposed to say stuff that's part of the deliberation.
I think... They're not in deliberation. They're still
No, but it will be. Like, you can't be
Yes.
talking this openly about a case until a verdict has been reached. Right?
The media coverage is really high, and there is a section for media in the courtroom. So
Okay.
while cameras were not allowed in the courtroom, it was said that during every break, each person's like media representative would come out and like kind of relay everything.
Okay.
And so I don't think anything's really secret at this point. So Justin Faulkner goes on to do a lot of interviews and says Scott was innocent all over any media source you can get on. Now, from the docuseries, he says that he was never defending Scott. He was defending the process.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. He did start getting death threats. He has kept them and shows them on the docuseries.
Oh. So this was his, like, moment of fame. A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Justin now thinks that the jurors serving saw how he was treated by the public after he was very vocal about how he thought Scott was innocent, and they took that to heart of, like, I think they all had a discussion towards the beginning of the trial together saying, like, we are either going to be heroes if Scott's guilty, or we're going to be public enemy number 1 if Scott's innocent.
Right.
And so I think he
Again,
thinks...
insane that we're just like, hey, you 12 people, come change your life in the name of justice, you know? Like,
it's insane.
It's like a beautiful system that it's like you have to be able to convince this like randomized pool of the community, and at the same time.
Yeah. So the trial continues. Justin is replaced by an alternate. all of the jurors say the most dramatic day for them was when they presented the photos of the bodies.
Oof. Okay.
Don't worry, I will provide a trigger warning when we get into the details.
This is prosecution
You're safe
presenting the
right
photos?
now. I think so. Some of the jurors say that it didn't seem like he showed any emotion at seeing the pictures, but some of the media that were sitting behind him said that it did seem like he was having some kind of reaction. Either way, you can't fucking win, right? So at this point, Amber Frey gets introduced. The Amber Frey tapes get introduced.
So like star witness.
Essentially. So the defense, they interviewed the defense lawyers in the docuseries. When the defense attorney gets the transcripts of the tapes, they remember being like, oh, like this is bad, but this is not like that bad.
Right.
And then when they got the physical tapes and heard Scott saying all of that stuff, they remember
Like
turning
hear the tone and the
they remember
intonation.
turning to each other and being like, we're screwed.
This is awful.
Yeah, because of like you heard how lighthearted he was at his wife's vigil.
Right.
Like that doesn't play well.
Because there's one thing about like a month after her disappearance, I'm now using the past tense because I have come to peace with the fact that she's
That's
not
one
returning.
thing, yeah.
It's the vigil praying for her safe return where you have the appearance of fully moved on romantically already.
And you're lying saying you're in Paris.
Actively at the candlelight service to like pray for your wife's return.
And the prosecutor's podcast made a lot of points that like there are a lot of outs for Scott during that time period where like he could, once Lacey disappears, he could be like, hey, like I lied to you. And like I was planning on divorcing my wife, but now my unborn child is missing as well. And like, I just can't keep doing like, there's so many places for him to not only not accept like that he was wrong, but also like, I don't know, like the fact that he just like doubles down on it really just like, I feel like doesn't play across well.
It doesn't play across. It obviously does not play across well. Part of it's like, you know, if you're Scott's defense team, right? Like this is the debate coach in me where it's like, if we had to defend this position, what do we say? And what we might say is that like Amber provided him the one outlet left in the world where he wasn't defined by this tragedy, this person that didn't know. But then the counter argument to that, the exercise we do with the kids is like, well, then it sounds like Scott's using these phone calls to check to see if she's heard the news yet or not. You know, that like it's either an escape from a world that's really awful or it's a continued check-in for a person who could be really incriminating for you as to how much they know.
Yeah. It's just, like, again, you can't win.
I couldn't do one of these episodes every week, but in it now, I'm like, okay.
It's just like, it's fascinating to me the way that it comes across to the jury, especially knowing that they thought he was innocent leading up to this. And I don't think this is what turns everyone. But yeah, his tone, the flirting, the giggling, the like basically like sexting over phone, whatever, phone sex, like, in a tape that was played in court on January 1st, he is asking her what she's wearing, and that plays in court. Shortly after they showed the dead bodies. And so I'm sure that the juxtaposition of those
was intentional and hard.
Oh, absolutely intentional by the prosecution. And then Amber Frey takes the stand with evidence. Someone unfortunately leaked salacious photos of her, some nudes that she had taken to the media, which of course probably didn't help. And she ended up having to lawyer up with Gloria Allred. Who
famous celebrity, like legal defense. Pretty
she
good.
Represented,
cut her teeth early on, and then
she represented OJ's sister. And so like she's good at that. Gloria Allred was concerned for her given the public's opinion of her. From what I gather, Gloria Allred did this pro bono. Like she just saw what was happening to Amber and was like, I got you.
A girl who the prosecution had not found yet, who the police had not found yet, who saw the newspaper and was like, I need to tell you what's going on. And then immediately I mean, obviously, Amber's innocence feels crystal clear here.
Oh, yeah.
That was immediately the police were like, "We need you to do this for me." She was like, "Yes,
Yes, absolutely.
And even in that Radio Shack parking lot where she's like,
Panicking. Yeah.
Tell me some names. What are the names of the people? What are the murder weapons around you?" Like she's like very like she's she's in it.
The fact that she called the police instead of Scott.
Yeah.
When she's probably like furious.
Right, furious and like maybe freaked out.
Yeah.
And it's like.
Even in the docuseries, I'm just like, I might follow you to war. Like,
a little bit.
Yeah.
And also, I was really prepared for at some point for Amber to go. When you told me about Tracy missing too, I thought we were about to connect. Sorry, Lacey missing too. It's near Tracy, California.
Yeah. No,
I thought we were going to hear 2 missing people cases.
No.
Truly thrilled it's just one
Yeah, it's
for
just
both
one.
Amber
Yeah.
and Amber's cute little daughter.
I know, right? Yeah. And it's very cute. So Amber's testimony, namely her tapes, changed the course of the case, specifically the tape from the night of the vigil. That's the one that people can't get over. Honestly, same. Like that one makes me like feel sick to my stomach. Jurors on the documentary say that the tapes is what started them believing Scott was guilty. Because like, how do you do that?
Right.
Like I don't know. And again, like. It's hard because he can do this and still not be guilty of murder. Right. He can still just be this asshole.
Right.
But
he can be grateful for his wife's passing and not have done the passing.
Yeah. So Scott also never incriminated himself in any of the tapes with Amber, even when she's like kind of obviously trying to get him to slip up. He when he admits to Amber that his wife is missing, he never says anything like incriminating. He just says, "My wife is missing and my unborn son." The experts that they call later, there's cadaver dogs. There's evidence from a cadaver dog where one dog scented Lacey at the marina, and that's a place that she hadn't been to. Another dog, however, didn't. There's thoughts that Scott's scent may have contaminated the scent piece that they used to get the dog locked on Lacey. Lawyers in the documentary call the tracking dogs bunk science, which kind of really bugs me because it's not. The dog can be bunk. The science in and of itself, I think, is pretty solid. Specifically, if you listen to Your Own Backyard, that podcast that helped solve Kristen Smart's murder, there's a whole thing about cadaver dogs because that's really what got them going on the case, and that's how they were able to locate where her body had been buried even after it had been moved. And there's one dog that had a phenomenal track record, but the owner had let the licensing slip, and so that's why it wasn't like allowed. But the owner of that dog goes on the podcast and makes a really good point that like this dog doesn't forget.
Right.
And like this dog, I think at one point that dog detected like a cow that had been dead for 11 years and buried like 12 feet underground or something like that. Like if the dog is good, I think the evidence is good.
Sure.
However, some of these dogs had failed their certifications, and there was something that one of the dogs that scented on Lacey was wrong like 75% of the time in this specific scenario where like the body was in a vehicle and not so
water was involved or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know that I agree with the cadaver dogs on this point, but I don't agree that it's bunk science. Here's the trigger warning. I might skip forward like 5 minutes. Maybe. I don't know. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Just skip forward until I say something. If you hear OBGYN, you're good. Okay, so the defense has a forensic pathologist that testifies that the way Lacey's body decomposed with only the torso and like limbs without the hands and feet decomposing doesn't make sense for what they know. However, I think that was kind of disproven by the prosecution, who brought a forensic anthropologist. The defense had argued that Connor's body was less decomposed than Lacey's body. Therefore, he must have died afterwards. I'm not going to get into the details because it is kind of a lot. Connor, there's no evidence of a vaginal birth or a C-section or something that we call a coffin birth, which if you want to look into it, you can. Don't promise. I don't recommend it. What happened is Lacey's body decomposed to the point where Connor was kind of released, right? And because his body was protected for so long, that's why he didn't decompose
there would have been a delay.
As much. Yes.
Okay.
But there's a lot of theories on the defense's side that he must have been handled after birth. his body shows the same signs as a baby that had been miscarried.
Okay.
So it's very clear that, and like his umbilical cord showed no signs of, basically if he had been born with his umbilical cord like that, he would have bled out.
Oh, okay.
He was never born. That is absolutely false. Yeah, so... And the twine that was left on Connor's body had no damage under it, so it couldn't have been used. There's a lot of trash in the area. Like even Scott said himself, Brooks Island had a lot of trash near it.
Right.
And so it's more than possible that just happened to get wrapped around him. Okay, that's it. That's all we're going to talk about with the bodies.
Okay.
Yes.
We're past the content warning.
We're past the content warning.
We got an email recently about someone who was listening to our episode driving through the middle of the night somewhere.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was the haunted ferret Jeff speaking in a baby voice. And the person, I'm sorry, I forgot. We got a lot of emails the last 2 weeks, or at least I responded to all of them in one day. But you were like, nope. And then the voice of a haunted baby ferret still rode with you in your truck. And I am really sorry about that.
Sorry.
But what I'm trying to say in general, like that last minute specifically, I personally wouldn't want to be driving down a dark road alone. So if that's what you were doing and you weren't in a lit studio like we are right now, sorry. Like, legitimately sorry.
Basically, the amount the bodies decomposed makes sense for when they think the bodies died on the 24th, right? Okay. There's a prosecution brought in OBGYN based off of the size of Connor when he was found and Lacey's last ultrasound. They can measure like the bones of a baby to kind of see how far they were along at whatever point. They're able to deduce that Connor's date of death could have been no later than December 24th.
Okay.
The fence also brings an OBGYN, and they say that Connor couldn't have died earlier than the 29th. However...
Okay, so prosecution saying this poor baby died the day of the murder that they're suggesting.
At the latest.
And the defense is saying, no, it couldn't have happened at
Earlier.
the soonest is the 29th.
The 29th. However, this expert kind of like completely breaks down on the stand under cross-examination.
Oof, okay.
He's unable to defend his credentials or expertise, and when questioned about an error in his report, he ends up just like really getting flustered and saying like, just cut me some slack.
Oof.
There's 2 more days, I think, of his testimony, and I don't think anyone listened. Everyone that was in the courtroom noted that the entire jury kind of like put down their notepads and were like,
oh,
yeah, so I don't know what his deal was.
God, so fascinating.
Yeah, the way that people like respond to stuff, right?
Because that's what the media is watching. As much as the media is watching the data, they're trying, or it's not the data, but like watching the evidence.
They're
and
seeing
like,
what the jury's doing.
Right, they're trying to read those body language, the judge. Yes, okay.
Okay, so these are the things that were excluded from testimony by the judge. Well,
so hold on. So am I to understand everything you have presented so far is essentially the facts of the case that the jury was given to decide. So everything that we've presented up so far, that is what they were
Those
given.
are the big things. Obviously, it's a 5-month-long case. If you
showed
want
me
to
a
get
picture
into it.
that said People's Evidence 122B, and it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you just flipped me off for a second.
No.
You were pointing. I was just like, oh, okay. I thought we were on the same page.
I guess I'll shut up then.
Just trying to clarify for the folks at home.
So one of the things that was excluded from testimony that people get really worked up about is the defense attorney did an experiment in a similar boat to what Scott Peterson had, where they had someone try and throw over like 150 pound weight over the side of this 15-foot boat into Berkeley, into San Francisco Bay. And the judge excluded this. And the way that the prosecutor's podcast explained it is that if you watch the video, and I've agreed after seeing the video, it looks like an infomercial doing it wrong, you know? Like where they're like,
sure. Has this ever happened to you?
Have you ever tried to flip an egg and it just like the egg explodes?
When you're trying to bring 18 drinks out to your friends and you just can't hold them all. And it's all gray and black. Okay. Yes,
that's what it kind of looks like. Okay. And then there's like a voiceover of the video that was like, he almost drowned. And it's like, yeah, it does look like that, but he's also been flailing around for like 15 seconds, you know?
Right.
And he tries it, I think, 3 or 4 times, and both times fail, or all the times fails. I found this in a podcast, and I cannot remember which podcast it was. You'll have to trust me that it happened in one of the sources that I'm going to link.
Okay.
The doc doesn't mention this, but a source said that the judge found out that the boat used in the experiment had a different center of gravity than Scott's actual boat.
Okay.
And so therefore making the experiment kind of bunk science.
Yeah.
But at some point, the judge does allow the jury to go into the physical boat, the actual boat, like on land, and
The
try
judge
and
lets
like
the jury just jump around in it.
and just kind of shake it around on land.
Sorry,
like,
I
on
just
its thing.
listen. I
Can you
guess
imagine
that's
a field
good.
trip for your jury?
I'm like, are we letting them solve it now?
Do
What
they
the
get in a car themselves, or do we drive them?
And how big is it?
Yeah.
But like,
Do you provide lunch?
what the fuck?
I
Like,
know.
Okay, but also like, what?
Yeah.
Like, no, you gotta, because like someone does it first, but then there's
And
like
then they all do it,
commentary,
yeah.
and there's a couple others,
And then the guy's like, well, you gotta shake it harder.
But it's also
Yeah.
during, is it during prosecution, or did they go on the field trip during
I don't know.
deliberations? Because if it's during like prosecution, they can't really talk about what they feel about it.
Yeah.
You can't talk about the case until you're in
I
deliberations.
imagine it would be during deliberations, but
Right.
I don't know.
Because the jury does get a chance to like ask for the evidence
Yes.
at the end of it for
Yes.
the deliberations. So if they were like, can we see the boat
boat,
to
yeah.
see what the center of gravity is?
Yeah. I don't know when it was, but that's just
Also,
hysterical
like,
to me.
to be frank, and I like to think I'm a person with a strong constitution, like I really do, but to be frank, the idea of sitting on a jury and then being like, I need to see the vessel that held the
Yeah.
victim so I can determine, I think I would just, for me, be too hollow of a ground to then
Yes.
like step into and like try to rock back and forth.
I don't know
But I
if that
don't
would
know.
make
I don't
it,
know
yeah.
if the calculation at that point is like, I have to get this right.
I have to see
and
it,
that's
yeah.
the priority and this is what I need to get it right.
I don't know.
I'm just kind of narrating all my thoughts
I
as
get
you
it.
are hitting me with this information.
So the other thing that's excluded from testimony, not by the judge, but by the defense and the prosecution, is the dog walkers, the people who witness her
Right.
walking the dog, for all of the reasons
So
I
for the
mentioned.
defense, they're like, those are our two strongest cases. That you can't just ditch a body over the side of a boat like this. And people who saw her alive at the
I
time he
think
left.
actually the defense made the decision to not include that for all the reasons that the prosecution didn't include that, knowing what the prosecution would do. The prosecution did brought several witnesses to the stand that were, one of them's kind of funny, other pregnant women in the area who had dogs that were walking them in the same area, and a bunch of people that had golden retrievers that were walking them in the same area around the same time. And I think the defense also knew that the prosecution had witnesses like on standby to come on and say like, no, I sent in a tip. I was shown a picture of Lacey. I know it's not her.
Devastating if you're like, we need to pull you in as a witness at the trial. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, for sure. What can I add?
Yeah.
And they go, so a pregnant woman was walking her dog and went missing. And that's like the theory. And we want to pull you in. And you're like, oh, but I'm not pregnant. I just have a dog. And they're like,
That happened.
uh-huh.
It wasn't.
Get on in there, sport.
It was-
What?
She's literally interviewed in the documentary. She's like, I wasn't pregnant, but I mean, I could ask for it. And I was like,
Has the state of California ever accused you of being obese? Hi.
you may be entitled to compensation. So yeah, and then I think the defense would have wanted to bring them on to discredit Karen Service, the one that got the dog back in, but I think she is arguably the most credible because she knows the family and the dog,
Right.
and has the evidence saying like, no, I know this is the time frame that this happened in, and the other people are like, after the missing persons report comes in, they're like, oh, I think I saw someone matching that description.
So is your theory then that Scott leashed the dog and then released it on purpose?
I think that's the prosecution's theory, is that they did that to kind of
Throw the
throw a
scent
wrench.
off?
Yeah, that she must have gone on a walk and gotten kidnapped. That's what Scott wanted people to think by releasing the dog.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's why the dog was found shortly after he left.
Yes.
Because the dog hadn't even gotten that far
Yeah.
yet.
That's what their theory is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the Prosecutors podcast has an artist that they have that makes sometimes it takes multiple episodes for them to cover a case, and so this artist makes a unique little title card for each of their cases.
Oh, okay.
And it's like never anything like super specific, but the one for the Scott Peterson case is like a line drawing of Mackenzie with the leash like trailing behind him,
Oh,
which was like
sad and haunting.
but also like I immediately know what case that is.
Sure.
Because of the dog. Yeah.
Can I ask, how much longer do you think you have of detail?
We're nearing the end, but I could use a bathroom break.
I could also use a stretch my
Yeah,
spine
let's
break.
do that.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we ended with the dog sightings,
Right.
why they were not presented. Okay. Now we're on deliberations.
Okay.
The closing arguments have ended. We're on deliberations. No one knows how it's going to pan out. The defense at this point is pretty sure they're going to end up in a hung jury.
Okay.
After 6 months of trial, they go to deliberations. At the start, they take a straw vote, and it is 12-2 in favor of guilt.
Okay.
So there's 2 holdouts for innocence. Day 5 of deliberation, one juror admitted to breaking the order to not do outside research, and so she gets cut,
Okay.
which is wild because I would not have admitted that.
If you can't lie on the phone, don't make lies. Little children.
She admitted on like the news that like, she was like, yeah, I like had a question and I wanted to find the answer and I found the answer and then I realized that I wasn't supposed to and I was like,
Listen,
ma'am,
I
you sat through 6 months of jury just to do
that
this.
might be the difference between you and I. You might stick it out to the very end, and me, having been presented all the details, might be like, I disqualify myself from making a final verdict.
Honestly.
13 of you, good luck.
Goodbye.
And then
Yeah.
no guilt on my conscience.
Yeah, honestly, I don't blame her. Okay, so she's replaced by an alternate jury named Rochelle Nice, who has the nickname Strawberry Shortcake. She has like bright red hair.
Okay.
Rochelle Nice comes in guns blazing. She is sure that he is guilty. I don't think the juror that left the original juror that left was convinced of innocence. So I don't think they flipped a vote with this. However, the foreman...
But they introduced the alternate juror after having missed the 4 days of deliberation?
They have to restart deliberations whenever
Okay.
a new juror is introduced.
Okay,
So
okay.
they restart. The foreman, who is like a doctor and a lawyer or something, like super smart, whatever. Apparently they had him as the foreman because he was just like so clearly
qualified.
like so above everybody. Like he was taking notes on everything and just like very attentive. And so this guy, the foreman, was very adamant about how he wanted deliberations to happen, how they went through the evidence, everything. And he was getting a little aggressive with the other jurors when they would try and argue with him. Unfortunately for Scott, the foreman was one of the innocent votes.
Okay.
He was sure of innocence, but the rest of the jury wasn't able to work with him. And so they complained to the judge, like, we can't work with him. Like, he's not willing to talk. He just wants to do things his way. And it's like not conducive to a conversation. And so he ends up getting replaced by another juror.
And that flips a vote.
That does flip the vote. The other innocent vote, I think, flips himself. He's interviewed in the doc, and he talks about how he thought Scott was innocent at the beginning, and then at the end he kind of flips. The foreman was replaced by another alternate juror on November 11th in the afternoon, and they restart deliberations again. And at this point, they realize that deliberations are starting again, so a lot of people go home because they don't expect an answer really quickly. I think it's about to be a weekend. It's Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
So
the media starts to go home.
Yeah, the defense attorney goes home. Mark Geragos goes home. A lot of Scott's family go home, except for Scott's mom because it's hard for her to travel. She has like health issues,
Okay.
I think. So she ends up staying. Unfortunately, by Friday morning, November 12th, the jury agrees 12-0 guilty.
Okay.
And so it took 9 hours to reach a verdict after 3 total jury turnovers. The verdict happened so fast that a lot of people aren't there, including Scott's family. Scott was convicted of murder for both Lacey and Connor, and Lee, Scott's father. So all of Scott's family surprised. The defense team surprised. They all expected a hung jury. Lee, Scott's father, was not surprised. And he says this on the docuseries, which I thought was like weird. He says he was not surprised due to the media coverage, but it's also like,
Okay.
you could at least like pretend, my
Right.
dude. Like,
Right.
there were like parties in the streets when the verdict was read. They had like people were out in the streets holding like radios up, and like that was like the one thing that was read on the radio, the verdict. And so there's a clip after the verdict has been read and after everything of juror number 4, who I didn't get the name, and Rochelle Nice, Strawberry Shortcake. Juror number 4, who I described. So I described him because this clip plays at the very beginning of the docuseries, and at that point you don't know that these are jurors.
Okay.
I described him as salt and pepper, push broom, mustache, aviators.
So a World War II pilot.
Yeah, literally.
Who was woken up in the 90s, early 2000s.
Yes. He's also interviewed in the docuseries, but they're at like a podium or stand or something, and they have a microphone, and
It's kind of crazy that the jurors would take questions. You would think you'd want them to remain anonymous.
That's another thing. The juror number 4 says, quote, "Guess what, Scotty?" And then strawberry shortcake says, "San Quentin's your new home." And juror number 4 continues, quote, "And it's illegal to kill your wife and child in the state of California," which I was like, that's illegal.
It was already
everywhere?
illegal? Yeah.
Seems
I
weird
don't-
for you to say that.
Even if you are
To an audience cheering.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you are fully convinced of his guilt.
Yeah.
And do believe that he's guilty, and that means that like he's about to receive the justice and punishment for his crimes. I still don't love the idea of the person who could have chosen to free him either way and was expected to be impartial and weigh as like clean of a like verdict as possible, like being like, let's rip it, and they doing like this tag team duo thing.
It's strange. It's
Yeah.
very strange. Juror number 8, who was also interviewed in the doc, and I didn't get their name because I started getting tired, was going to a bar, and the bartender reported him for talking to people about how he was going to get Scott Peterson. I think this maybe was before the verdict, and how juror number 8 was expecting potential book deals. The bartender was subpoenaed, but never ended up taking the stand, and juror number 8 ended up staying on the trial. We're not really sure what happened. There is footage of him with his attorney at the courthouse, and there is a 2-week delay before the sentencing, and I think this is what was happening. They were dealing with this before the sentencing, but I don't know what ended up happening.
Because the defense
with that.
is like, listen, if he was talking book deals,
then like clearly he's onto something. So after a 2-week break for dealing with whatever, the sentencing happens. There's an argument about if the death penalty would be applied. Lacey's mother makes a testimony that was really brutal to like listen to. Like she's like sobbing and screaming on the stand, and that really kind of sealed the deal for Scott. So he is given the death penalty. Even now, asking in the doc, obviously they didn't interview every juror that made the decision, but none of them recant their decisions. They all stand by the fact that they think he's guilty, as of the doc in 2017. So, following this, Scott Peterson appealed a habeas petition in 2012, essentially meaning that there's like new evidence and they can appeal for a new trial.
And he did that in what year?
2012.
Okay.
There's multiple. 2012. So here are the things that his habeas team.
Are we going to talk about the jurors still some more? Okay.
Yes.
Because I'd like the whole book deal thing.
It's insane.
Because the
Yeah.
book I would want to read isn't like a laying out of the cases. Not like William
Yeah,
Cords,
yeah,
who
yeah.
was like a testimony and also letters and our own reactions.
I do want to read that.
A crossword and a Sudoku and it, like that.
The New York Times, but old.
Take a whiff. It's a criminal, right? Made out of a skin, right? And like instead of one of those, which like obviously the media had documented their narrative and then had presented at least again like a version of what was happening in the trial, what I would be fascinated by is a book about the interactions of the jurors. Because I don't actually know if that is like under like if like on week 2 I found out juror number 8 is actually mother of 4. And like then there's like that whole like secret world behind everything that actually it's all going to center around. That sounds super interesting.
I would
to me.
read a book about the deliberations.
I also would feel uncomfortable purchasing it from a juror who was named. I would want it to be like
They've all
a
been
juror
named,
from the trial shares blankety blankety blank, and then that I don't know.
It's weird.
It
Yeah,
is weird
it
because
is
like
weird.
there's the human inquiry of like wanting to peek in, and the other side of it where it's like, is the peeking then
It's also
jeopardizing justice?
The weird part to me is that I feel like in murder trials, you try and keep the names of the juror innocent or the names of the juror anonymous because you recognize the person getting sentenced is a murderer.
Right.
And in this case, it's very clear that none of the jurors are scared of Scott, which just like adds another layer of like, what did they think actually happened?
Right.
Like, are they not scared of retribution from Scott?
Sure.
Do they think he's a mastermind? Do they think...
They clearly are convinced of his guilt and in love with their ability to punish him for it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe not necessarily a bad thing to have a community that is invested in its justice process.
Yeah. Oh, I should mention the one juror that I mentioned that initially voted for innocence and then flipped. That was Zane. This is insane. Yeah.
Sometimes, though, oh God, there's this beautiful poem. I might have to read it later. And it was like, in respect to the pizza delivery guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the kind of guy that I actually trust.
Yeah.
And Zane sounds like a kind of person who, but also at the same time, Zane's like, I don't know, man. He just got up there and he just like, reminded me a lot of my dad. No, I do have a weird relationship with him. Why do you ask? Anyways, best man I ever knew in my entire life. You know?
Of all the jurors they interview, Zane seems like the most level-headed for sure. I don't know what it is about. It's
that
like
actually makes
the
me feel
way he presents
sad
himself.
and more conflicted that he's the most even-keeled
He
about
was
all
the
of
one
them.
that I liked the most of all the jurors.
Have you ever had that moment though where someone's like almost 99.9% of the time a man is talking to you and they're talking about a man that they really respect and admire, and it's crazy to get like the Betty Crocker recipe for the thing that's in front of you, because it's like, listen, I want you to know two things. First off, that recipe has salmonella in it, okay? And you need to be baked longer. And since we missed the initial pass, therapy. I would not be proud of this and would then hold that to account.
Yeah, please don't.
But whatever.
It's not good.
Who do I know? What do I know except,
yeah.
You know, my role as an educator. Go ahead.
The other juror that I liked was Rochelle Nice.
Strawberry shortcake?
I didn't like her in any footage of her from back then, but her present tense, I was like, I would ask you for advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was a weird dichotomy.
Which is also because when was this documentary made?
2017. It was
Okay,
published
so
in
15 years,
yeah.
maybe filmed 12, 13 years afterwards, though.
Yeah.
You know, like, my God, if you were to interview 12 years, let's do some math because I'm young. If you were to show me clips of me 12 years ago, you're showing me clips of me at 19.
That is wild. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's deeply unsettling.
I hate it.
Especially because you're 13 in those interviews.
That's
Imagine
my least
us
favorite
together
year.
in a room and then like a ghost comes in and it's like, someday you guys are going to be besties. And we'd be like, that?
No.
That's a child.
I still think that's a sin.
I'll have my nuns, who I actually hate, pray for you.
Truly. Okay, so in the habeas petition.
I still think that's a sin. Sorry, just now kind of
Thank you.
catching up. Sorry.
That was funny.
In the habeas petition.
The habeas petition, they talk about investigation issues and evidence that was not present in trial. So Scott's alibi was publicized before the bodies were found, which then leads people to believe, or his appeal team at least, to believe that someone who was trying to frame Scott could have dumped the bodies where he was. However, the prosecutors point out a good point that the police seem to think it was the burglars, and the burglars were caught January 2nd, which doesn't make sense because the bodies were not found until April something.
Right.
And also whoever did this would have to have dumped the bodies in the exact same place, in the exact same time frame for the bodies to have decomposed in the right way.
Right.
And I think they did have an expert in trial who testified to like the currents and everything, saying that if Scott had dumped the bodies a little deeper, they would have actually washed out to sea.
Okay.
Instead of washing back into the bay.
Do you think the bodies are a game changer in the trial? That if he had gone out a little bit further, there would have been no bodies and the conviction would have been different?
I think if the bodies hadn't been found, I don't think Scott would have been arrested. I don't think there was grounds.
Oh, you think you go all the way back to the beginning? He's not even charged for it?
Because the judge didn't sign the arrest warrant until the bodies were found.
Right.
And that was the final piece that the judge was like, yeah, he was there and people were already suspicious of him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's also so that's one thing. There's also a letter from an inmate, Sean Tenbrink. Or not a letter. I guess it's a phone call that was recorded from an inmate, Sean Tenbrink, on the phone.
So second Sean in the story.
Yeah.
We've
But this one's a
never
man.
once said that name ever.
Yeah.
And they are at the start and end of
And
this
they
episode.
are both spelled SHAWN.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like, arguably the correct way to spell Sean, but not the way I think Sean is spelled.
There was a gymnast from Iowa
Yeah,
named Sean.
yeah.
Here's the thing. When you come from a boxy Midwest state, you just root for them. Like, obviously we hate Iowa on a college football level, but when they're at the Olympics, it's like, well, that's just one of our girls right there, you know? I don't know what those foreign country
all on the
kids...
same team.
Right, all those foreign country kids who, you know, came from the coast or whatever.
Yeah,
all those
boo.
California, New York, Florida, Colorado people. Ooh. I want someone who I know for a fact has smelled cow shit.
And corn. Okay, so Sean Tenbrink is on the phone with Adam, who is a close friend. Adam is Sean's brother. Adam is also close friends with Stephen Todd, who is one of the convicted burglars of the Medina burglary. Stephen had told Adam that Lacey had confronted them and they threatened her. And as soon as it was brought up, Sean, the inmate, started yelling, "Shut up, shut up. This could be monitored. We're not talking about that." Lieutenant Aponte...
What?
Yes. Lieutenant Aponte recorded this conversation and after called a tip in to the police. And someone called him back and Aponte sent the physical tape in to the police. The Modesto police no longer have a copy of this tape.
Of course they don't.
And Aponte did not keep a copy, so now it's gone. And we also have no record of who called Aponte back asking for him to send the tape.
What?
That's the biggest one that was like, you're fucking kidding me.
Because not only does that put the burglars there at the house,
yep.
but like admits to them seeing her alive after he's left and puts them there on December 24th when she is potentially still alive, not December 26th.
Yep.
That is huge.
Yep.
Who's saying this?
It's Adam. So it's Sean is in prison. He's talking to his brother Adam, who is out of prison.
Okay.
Adam is friends with one of the convicted burglars.
Okay, this is now such a stretched link already.
It's hard to believe, but
especially if it's like, could I get my brother Sean out for cooperating evidence with somebody else?
And it's also hard because Sean could have said shut up for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
For mentioning another crime, for mentioning a murder when I don't know what he's been convicted of. Maybe he just doesn't want to even be like, there's a lot of pieces, but if it's true in any way, it's wild that the police conveniently don't have the tape anymore.
Wild being a very suspect adjective here. I understand what you're saying, but yes.
I don't know if I believe it, but it is crazy that it was never brought into court.
It's the third degree of separation already that makes it so tenuous, and also like what are the motives of the people involved?
Exactly.
And that it's then like nameless as to who asked for it. And how do you not have a second copy of that tape? How do you not?
It's still arguing too that the burglars went from burglars to murderers.
Right.
And that's still a hard jump to make when they're obviously targeting families that are gone because they don't want to have that interaction, you know?
Or they are targeting families that are gone and then it spirals out of control because they chose to do it earlier in the morning.
Yeah.
Especially since we already know the burglars were like, no, we put the case outside the house at this hour. Yeah. And they were like, well, no, you didn't. We have like live video coverage.
Yeah, we literally, that's not possible.
And so it's already like, we're glad that you basically self-admitted to this burglary. So the details the burglars add do not add up.
Yeah, exactly.
And it feels a little bit, maybe this isn't true, but because I do feel like you've done an honest accounting of the way things went down. It feels like the police immediately were like, shh, we have zeroed in on somebody, and this is actually not super helpful.
Yeah. So a lot of issues there.
Yeah.
The other thing that...
But also at the same time, sorry, I'm going to cut you off again.
You're good.
I just, like, all of that being said, which lives in a world of hypotheticals, yeah, there's probably is enough links. It's the raining analogy for Scott, you know? Like, he came in dripping wet. He has a lot
of links.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard to disprove him. So the other thing that is mentioned in the documentary is that there are some pages. So when the prosecution sent the discovery to the defense, every page of it has to go through a scanner to get it sent over. Apparently, they argued that sometimes, since there were so many pages, some of the pages would stick together, and so they were missed. There's 10 pages of missed discovery to the defense. One of these pages was handwritten notes from the mailman. And the mailman said that Mackenzie would always bark at the mailman whenever he came in. The Mackenzie was known to be very protective of Lacey specifically, would bark and stuff. And was also just territorial in general, would bark when people walked by. And the mailman said he has to check in quite a bit, so there's a pretty detailed record of when he was at whichever house.
Is that just safety for USPS?
I have no idea.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I want to like cheer for USPS in this moment.
Yeah. And when he gets to certain houses, he says he got to the house this Peterson house on the 24th, the gate was open. Karen's services timeline shows that the latest she could have found Mackenzie and put him back was like 10:30. It was between 10:18 and 10:30, and the mailman gets to the house about 25 minutes later. So that then
like
asks
10:55.
Yeah, so then
Okay.
that asks the question that who opened the gate, because Karen says she closed the gate behind Mackenzie, but also then why was Mackenzie wandering the street? It's just like,
Wait, hold on. So Karen's
Yeah.
like, I found Mackenzie wandering, and I put her back,
yep.
and then she was found out on the street again.
That's what they're saying, that the gate was reopened, that the mailman said that the gate was open. Here's what's going to happen. So the documentary argues this never made it to court. That is false.
Okay.
The prosecutors who read the prosecutor's podcast, who read all of the court transcripts, saw that the mailman actually testified in court, and it was not excluded. In the cross-examination, though, he says that there was nothing unusual aside from the dog not barking, and makes no mention of a gate being opened or closed in cross. And the defense never asked if the gate was open or closed. So he writes a note to the police, says the gate is open. And then when he's actually in court, he's never asked if the gate is open or closed. And he also says he notices nothing unusual.
So, like, Mackenzie would have barked from inside the house if he was there.
There's like a front yard too.
Sure.
There's like a front gate and a back gate. It's like a. It's
No,
a-
I'm sure it's
yeah.
a beautiful home.
It's an absolutely beautiful home, but there's a lot of, yeah, it's weird. He also though says that he delivered a package on the 24th, but showing the records, he did not deliver a package on the 24th. It was a later date.
Okay.
So what the prosecutor's podcast thinks happened is that he misassociated one day for another,
Yeah.
where the gate was open and he delivered a
Well,
package.
especially if it's like just a mundane morning. I mean, I think about
Mm-hmm.
the route I drive to school in the morning passes at least 2 or 3 bus stops.
Yeah.
And I had this kid in class who had this really just big curly,
Yeah.
this kind of 15, 16-year-old boy, but like afro. Like
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
see it bouncing down the hallway before he'd get to class. And so sometimes, some mornings you would just see that, right?
Yeah.
And be like, oh, there's so-and-so. And, in my
Yeah.
mind, I'd be like, oh, I'll see him in an hour or whatever.
Yeah.
And there were some times where I would, in class, be like, in my head, be like, oh, it's weird so-and-so's not here. I thought I saw him at the bus stop
earlier,
earlier.
yeah.
But it's so easy to get,
to
like...
misconstrue those days,
It's
yeah.
noon on Wednesday, and I'm thinking of Tuesday's commute
Especially
to
when
school.
you're like your
When
daily
it's such a
routine,
mundane detail,
yeah,
yes,
is
exactly.
It's the same thing. So I think that's a really shitty thing that the documentary did by insinuating that the defense was never given that evidence
Right.
and that he never testified in court. When in fact, I don't know if the defense was given that evidence
Or wasn't
but
prepared for it
he
properly, but yeah.
was. He did testify in court. The habeas petition that they filed.
In 2012.
In 2012 does mention the issue with the mailman, but it does not say that like, hey, we were never given this. What it says is that they think their defense lawyer, Mark Garagos, didn't ask the right questions,
Okay.
i.e. Was the gate open or closed? And so that's kind of a big deal in the documentary, and the prosecutor's podcast was like, that's really disingenuous of
Yeah.
them to present it like that when it's just factually untrue. And going off of that same vein, I highlighted everything in blue that I put in my notes that was not mentioned in the documentary, just because I feel like a lot of podcasts that I've listened to that have come out since the 2017 documentary and they've watched the documentary, they've all seemed to be more persuaded towards Scott's innocence because of the documentary. And I think the documentary does a fantastic job of laying out the facts of the case. I think they do a fantastic job of leaving out really crucial details.
Sure.
So some of the things that they exclude are why the judge excludes the experiment for tossing the body over the boat, the fact that the center of gravities don't
right.
match. They exclude, the entire mention of the fisherman expert who said that Scott didn't have the correct stuff to fish in salt water.
I mean, he would have known growing up in San Diego and having fished with his dad.
Yes. And they exclude the mention of the concrete expert entirely about the fact the concrete expert said that concrete didn't match.
Okay.
They exclude the discussion about what clothing she was found in versus what Scott said she was in. In fact, all of the like little reenactments that they do of the like people seeing her walking the dog, all of the reenactments of that actor are in a white blouse, black pants.
Okay.
Even though her body was not found in that.
With that outfit.
Yeah. So they exclude any mention of any other extramarital affair that Scott had during the marriage.
They don't mention Amber at all?
No, they mention Amber. They don't mention the other two.
Okay.
They don't mention the P.O. box that Scott got, which was weird because I feel like that actually works in Scott's favor.
Sure.
Of like, why would he have gotten the P.O. box, whatever. They don't mention any of the reasons that Lacey might not have wanted to walk the dog. So her incident of passing out, the prenatal yoga instructor testifying that like she couldn't walk to the car, the doctor telling her to take it easy. They didn't testify that the prosecution had found some people who said that they saw a person walking a dog that was pregnant, but also identified that it wasn't Lacey. They didn't talk about the patio umbrellas not being unloaded from the car. They didn't talk about Lacey mopping while 8 months pregnant, while the housekeeper had been there the day before. They don't talk about the 2-day fishing license at all, which it feels really like disingenuous. They don't talk about the timeline of when Scott bought the boat, which I think is really like I feel like that's pretty incriminating.
Sure.
Yeah, if you're like looking at.
So you are under the assumption that it was premeditated to a degree. It wasn't that he was caught but it was.
I'm not sure where I lie on Scott's innocent or guilt. I'm saying that the documentary was very disingenuous
some things.
in how they presented things. I think they recognized the power of the media, and I think they recognize that they have power to change.
Sure.
Which I feel like honestly they're owed at this point with how much lying the media did surrounding this case. But it's still
the
like
documentary is always so interesting too because it's like. After the media show and the legal system, like documentaries then get to have an unanswered say. Like they just get to like put things out there
and
that
now
don't
people just
live
take it
in the environment. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and they get, even if they have like arguing opinions like Nancy Grace versus Scott Peterson's family, ultimately they know what they're doing.
Right.
The film will tell the story regardless of the
And I think that's
witnesses.
sometimes good if you can like take a second to take a breath, step back from like the sensationalism and be like, well, what can we look at on paper?
Yeah.
And how can we take like a new eye at this, right? I mean, a really common thing I'll have the kids do when we're just writing something is I'm like, just go take a walk. Like, let's go and walk. Let's like walk away from this and come back with something new. But then also at the same time, stuff you suggest in a documentary that might have been shot down very easily by someone in the moment, like that opportunity isn't there.
That's why the thing with the mailman I feel like is the most like point blank just like lie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of omissions and I feel like I can understand that, but this one's just like factually untrue.
True.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's presented in the last episode of the docuseries when they're like starting to build up to like like the very last moment where, you know, when you finish a docuseries you're kind of like, yeah, like that man is innocent or guilty, you know, and it just felt like not
even
great.
the Gardner Museum documentary, and I remember like episode 1 it was like wow, and episode 2 was like okay, and then episode 3 I was like and then episode 4 I was like okay, so you have to like name someone here at the end.
Exactly. So other things mentioned in the habeas petition are the trial issues, so the jury selection process, the fact that Judge DeLucchi dismissed anyone who didn't believe in the death penalty when he should have been asking it kind of the other way around. They also mention that Strawberry Shortcake, Rochelle Nice, they say she lied on a juror intake form. And here's where I kind of disagree as well. So when Rochelle was 4.5 months pregnant, she filed a restraining order against her ex's current partner who was harassing her.
Okay.
And she didn't disclose this when she was asked if she has ever been a part of a criminal proceedings. The prosecutor's podcast points out that is actually a civil proceeding.
Right.
And Rochelle points out in the docuseries that was actually dropped.
Right.
And so
I don't know how many people would view that as like a criminal proceeding.
Exactly.
Criminal proceedings feels like charged and, you know, prosecution, defense. Right. Like a simple matter before the court doesn't always register in my mind as a case, you know?
Yeah, so I kind of agree that like if she had mentioned it, I don't think she would have been selected. But at the same time, I can't necessarily blame her for not mentioning it.
Oh, because it incriminates her in the sense that like she would have had
experience. She was in a very similar situation that might give her.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So they're also mad about the cadaver dogs being allowed in court while the boat experiment was not allowed in court, despite the like kind of iffiness of the, I don't know. There's a hydrologist expert that testified that based on the tides, where the bodies ended up makes sense for the tides. This expert actually did not have the right expertise in those kinds of movements of bodies of water. The prosecution, OBGYN, that testified that the 24th was Connor's latest date of death, ended up realizing they used the wrong formula and measured the wrong bones in that situation.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how legit this piece is, just because I don't necessarily understand the science behind it. But later, when talking to the appeal team, he now says Connor could have lived until January 3rd.
Oh.
Based off of his new calculations. But I think the prosecutor's podcast does a really good job of kind of like explaining why gestational periods are just like so hard to understand, because she realized she was pregnant in June, but it doesn't say when she was conceived, right? And as babies grow, it's kind of exponential. So as you get towards the later terms, the amount of change you see day to day is so small.
Sure.
So to say that the 24th had to be the last day versus the 29th had to be the earliest day.
Right.
That difference of days doesn't really...
It's not as like, it's not pinpoint in that way.
Exactly. And so...
And I'm sure the prosecution strategy was like, introduce as much examples and evidence as possible. So if stuff inevitably does fall when it's like, oh, it should have been this and not that, or it's a bit grayer than I initially presented.
Exactly. And so I don't think this actually breaks either case, right? I think it's just like, it just proves that gestational age is hard
and
to...
they can't prove how long that Lacey's body has been decomposing. There's no way
I think there was an expert that said the way her body decomposed made sense for the amount of time that it was in there. I don't know. It's just a whole fucking thing. So the new evidence and new conclusions from existing evidence that have been presented. This is the biggest one between 1999 and 2002, so 3 years. 7 pregnant women disappeared in the same area. There's 3 in Modesto and then 4 within 80 miles of Modesto.
Chilling.
Yeah, Sacramento.
That was during the time frame of this? So
within 3 years.
From when to when again?
1999 to 2002, when she went missing.
Okay, so it's not like it continues after Scott's arrest.
I'm not sure if it does or not.
Okay.
Either way, it's kind of creepy. So there's one woman in the Bay Area, Evelyn Hernandez, disappeared around 6 months before Lacey, and she actually, trigger warning for like 5 seconds, she washed up in San Francisco Bay as well, and was recovered in the same-ish conditions as Lacey. No hands, no feet, no head. Her baby was never recovered, although it was not with her body. Okay. That's the big difference.
And there's nothing to insist that, like, Scott wasn't behind it.
No.
But there's nothing to really insist that he was.
Yeah, exactly. There was one witness, or not one witness, someone who called in a tip or made a report or something. Lourdes Avila. She had a clothing store. It was in the Modesto area, I think. And on the 24th, she was expecting a lot of business. So she was out working at her store, and she was 8 months pregnant with the same due date as Lacey. And she noticed there's 2 men in a car kind of across the street, and they were looking at her, and they looked kind of suspicious. They gave her bad vibes, and so she went into her store to hide, and she noticed one of the guys kind of walking into the store, and so she went into the back, called the police, and as soon as she called the police, they left. And she thinks that she could have been Lacey. After hearing about Lacey, she recognizes that that could have been her. If
it could have just been gruff men who were lost, or it could have been
someone trying to kidnap a pregnant woman.
Been either. Okay.
And she was never asked about it again or followed up with police specifically. It is kind of chilling to see her interview in the docuseries. It's a very short segment, but you see the daughter that she was pregnant with, and you like recognizing that that's how old Connor could be. Yeah. Is kind of hard. But that's that. And I think the weirdest part about that, those 2 pieces of evidence, the like 7 pregnant women going missing, and then the Avila witness statement, some people think that that's a satanic cult. And I feel like applying that term makes it feel more conspiracy theory.
Satanic panic kind of
which
stuff.
is just like, it could just be someone with a weird fetish or something.
It's also, I mean, it's a region of the country that has millions of people living in it too. And you're talking about, obviously, the worst thing imaginable that happened to, but to 7 women. right? And
Which
it's-
is weird.
And I'm not
yeah.
trying to say that like
No,
those,
yeah,
I
yeah.
hope that didn't come across as crass. What I'm trying to say is that like it's millions of
It
people.
could be a coincidence.
It could absolutely be a coincidence when you have that many people living in an area. If something
true.
like that happened like in my hometown, right, that'd be
Yeah, it's
that'd
like,
be-
oh my God,
right.
someone's onto
And
it.
Every
Yeah.
single one of those women lived like vibrant and beautiful lives and did not
Yeah.
deserve to die.
No, absolutely
Not what I'm
not.
trying to say
No,
either,
yeah, yeah.
but just
That's wild, yeah. So here are the updates since that habeas petition.
in 2012.
In 2012, I'm not sure if there's been 3 or 2 habeas petitions. That's the one in 2012. In 2017, there was the habeas appeal. The Attorney General office responded with a 150-page document citing, quote, overwhelming evidence that Scott was guilty. There's
Okay.
a quote from that document saying, his expressed wanderlust and desire to be responsibility-free, which he conveyed to his mistress as the birth of his son neared, buying a boat mere weeks before Lacey's disappearance, quote, fishing with the wrong gear on Christmas Eve morning in inclement weather, surreptitious trips to the marina in various rented vehicles after Lacey's disappearance, lies to friends and family concerning his whereabouts. That's one thing I didn't mention just because it's not a huge deal, but he would, while the search for Lacey was going on, he would often drive to the marina and just kind of like stare out over it, which is weird. And oftentimes like serial killers will go back to the scene of the crime,
Right.
killers will go back to the scene of the crime, but it's also to know like he knows that like this is where the police think he was.
Right.
And that's where the police think they're going to find the body. And so I think there's a lot going on there. I don't
is
know
he
that.
claiming to be like searching for it still?
It just doesn't.
If he is innocent, was it like the last place he was before his life ended?
Or like he
is
could be thinking like, if I wasn't here, I could have protected my wife and son.
Right,
you know,
right,
like I don't think
right.
that proves anything. But that's something that they said. Supervising Deputy Attorney General Donna Provenzano discounted eyewitnesses' spotting of Lacey, saying that such sightings were legion, while noting 74 reporting sightings in 26 states and overseas, most of which she stated were neither viable nor corroborated.
Right.
Quote, the sale of Lacey's car and an inquiry to sell their home, including furnishings, subscribing to pornography channels while the search was ongoing, Lacey's and Connor's bodies washing ashore not far from where Scott Peterson's location on the bay, condition of the bodies correlating with the timing of Lacey's disappearance, and Scott Peterson disguised appearance and possession of survival gear and copious amounts of cash at the time of his arrest. So that's what they say are evidence to his guilt. Which is hard because like some of those like yeah definitely like doesn't look good and I don't have an explanation for it, but some of it's like okay, those are things that actively like they look bad but they're not.
Right. None of them are a crime and necessarily.
No. Yeah, exactly. So in 2019 Gavin Newsom did the moratorium on the death penalty.
Right.
And in 2020 the California Supreme Court overturned Scott's death penalty and ordered a new sentencing with the quote, Peterson contends his trial was flawed for multiple reasons, beginning with the unusual amount of pretrial publicity that surrounded the case. That's like the appeal, I think. And the court responded, quote, the Supreme Court said that. And then the court responded saying, quote, we reject Peterson's claim that he received an unfair trial as to guilt and thus affirm his convictions for murder. 2021, Peterson is resentenced to life without the possibility of parole. 2022, Judge Masuyo denies another habeas petition based on one of the jury's misconduct. I think Strawberry Shortcake's misconduct about lying, saying that she hadn't been a part of a criminal proceeding. 2023, Peterson's attorneys file another habeas petition citing, quote, violations of state and federal constitutional rights and state statutory rights, including a claim of actual innocence that is supported by newly discovered evidence. So, January 2024, the LA Innocence Project announced it will begin representing Scott. The Los Angeles Innocence Project is not the same as the Innocence Project.
Okay.
But they're both part of the Innocence Network, as we kind of mentioned earlier. So in March 12th of this year, the LA Innocence Project defense requested for post-conviction DNA testing. They had 14 items that they wanted to request DNA testing on. April 22nd, the DA filed opposition to the motion, and there's a hearing scheduled for May 29th. On May 29th, the judge ruled that one of the 14 proposed items can be retested. the piece of duct tape found on Lacey's pants. This was previously tested, and human DNA was found, but no DNA profile could be obtained at the time. And that is where we're at currently.
Why did the judge, I mean, that's like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why did the judge only allow one of the 14?
Some of the others just didn't seem relevant. There's a few pieces from around where the bodies were discovered. Some were from the burglary site.
Okay.
And there was a few from some like torched van that I'm not sure what the relation to the case is.
Okay.
It seems, I think this one probably was only accepted because it had already shown the presence of human DNA. And it seems like the other ones were just kind
And
of
a
like...
direct correlation to the body of the victim.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, as always, you did a 10 out of 5 job
10 out of 5.
on the research side of things.
Look at this. Look at this fucking link list.
I have never done something like that. You have just
I also made like a
Yes.
full timeline below. And
someone-
then these are notes I didn't include.
As someone who's currently going through grad school, like, I get it to the point where you're like, I'm pretty sure I've overshot it, but I have no idea how to now stop overshooting it.
Yeah.
Wait, did you table of contents it?
No, if you just make it a header in Google Docs.
That's
it
so
creates
fascinating.
The table of contents. Yeah, where do you think?
Yeah. I don't necessarily think I'm okay with him being in prison right now.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying
Yes,
to say.
yeah.
I think the justice system made of like imperfect people
Yes.
reached an understandable conclusion. I say that with the knowledge that he's not going to be executed.
Yes,
Because
yes.
of California's
That's the big
new
thing.
position on the death penalty. That, if we're getting into hot takes
Yeah.
here for a second, is something I agree with. Like my own personal opinion is that if it's a government that derives its power from the people, that government then can't assume the power of execution over
Yeah.
those people,
Yeah.
even at an individual level. It is perhaps maybe too like hoity-toity philosophical, but regardless, I think that intersection then makes me feel okay about where we are currently at.
Yeah.
And if evidence does clear him, then there needs to be compensation and
Yeah.
remittance for the time that was taken away from him. But I
Yeah.
think this is just how the system can work. But like, am I
Yeah.
like, they got him 100%. Like, I'm going to go celebrate in the
Yeah.
street too. I don't think so. I don't, one, think you should celebrate justice in that way usually. And
Exactly.
two, yeah, there are still definitely lingering questions.
I have a lot of questions. It bothers me that the prosecution doesn't really have a how, when, why,
Right,
where.
yes.
And like they're not
Huge.
able to prove any of that. I think Scott Peterson's innocent. I mean, in general, no. But
Right.
like of a murder, I don't know. You know?
huge thing for me that I'm still hung up on.
Yeah.
And I am with the prosecution. Again, I think I've said my big donut hole for me is the how and when.
Yes.
And does the body then immediately get stored? Or like what? Because
Yeah.
even if it's like a non-penetrative death, like
Yeah.
the body will still start
Usually
to
still
do
has-
things,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
would leave like at least I think they would leave a stain. Like, but
Yeah.
the thing for me that I then get hung up on is who tries to dispose of a body in the middle of the day. Even if it's on the shore, if there's not that many boats, then the boats out there might be looking at you more. Also, like, middle of a bay isn't necessarily, like, you could have an angle from any perspective, you know, of a person watching you. It's not like you're in the backyard and there's trees all around you and you can see the
Yeah.
one, like, literally anybody could maybe be able to see you. Also, like, that island doesn't look super far. Maybe he's on that back side of the island, but just the idea of, I have now done this crime, and in the middle of the day, I am going to do this thing where even if it's not a body, it's illegal to dump things in the
Yeah.
ocean.
Yeah.
Like, even best case scenario,
Yeah.
it's like construction material you would get like tracked down for, even if you were Mother Teresa dropping in it, right? And you were in your
Yes.
bonnet or habit or
Yeah.
whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So that's tough for me to understand and explain. I do not get the profile of a man who is so upset at his life that he wants to commit murder too. Like
it's weird. It doesn't like usually with like serial killers you see a pattern of behavior before their first murder, and it's just like I think where I get like confused is that the fact that the body's washed up where he had been that day is really just doesn't look good. And also if someone were framing him, who and why?
Right. And like, why go after the husband when you have actually like a crime happening right across the street, which like might have been then easier to pin on because you can play them off against each other.
Exactly.
We have the other two admitting to it. We just need your, which is what they've done before against hundreds of other people.
That's the other thing that they point out is that if it was like a random kidnapper or something, that means that no one has made a peep.
Right.
This entire time.
Right.
There's been nary a leak or anything. No one's turned against another person. It hasn't been someone that's been convicted that's been like, hey, I have evidence here for you.
But
it's just like, it's hard.
There's that scene from, now we're into like average man on the street having a conversation with a friend moment, which probably isn't a good thing to do on a podcast that we publish, but it's that scene from Legally Blonde where Elle Woods is like, happy people just don't kill people, right? And she's talking about like the person endorphins.
Yes.
It sounds like this man was getting basically everything he wanted already. It's not he was like, I wanted a boat, she said no to boat, right? I wanted a girlfriend who had a whole life and she said no, don't have girlfriend, right? Like it doesn't feel, and like it's like if the wife is like, I can't believe you would cheat on me, I'm now going to leave you, and you wanted her to stay. It's just
so strange.
The lack of a very clear motive, clear priors, clear like way the murder was committed. But then it feels like everything else is colored in so vividly.
That's what the Prosecutor's podcast has a really good line at the beginning of, I think, their first episode that is like, is Scott Peterson guilty or is he the most unlucky person alive? Because how does that timeline add up like that? And you're innocent.
Is he unlucky or is he truly just like a weird dude? You know? Like,
it bothers me that people frame him as like guilty based off of his actions after the death, because there is another murder. This is the third one that I relate to this case, is the murder that Chris Watts committed against his wife, unborn child, and 2 children. It actually happened in Lafayette, Colorado, and there's this very similar situation where he was acting real fucking weird after the murder and when the police are questioning him, and I think people tend to relate, he actually was guilty. He was also like bad at being a criminal. But I feel like people relate that Chris Watts murder to Scott Peterson and think, well, if you act weird after your wife's murder and people suspect you already, then you must be guilty. And it's like, that's not like none of these things ultimately lead to him being a murderer. Right.
Because also, like, I mean, any discussion about your wife's murder, which immediately causes you grief, and is then also a conversation about how you might be executed in the state of California for this, which then immediately creates fear. So it's like grief and fear. And what does that look like, you know?
Terrified. Yeah. You can't.
Especially with, like, I don't know, like, I think you did a wonderful job, and I understand why the decisions were made as they were, and I don't know if they got it right.
Same. I can see it going both ways.
Yes.
And it's hard, especially listening to over 12 hours of content pushing me in one way or another. I had to be really careful because I did the first 2 episodes of the docuseries and then listened to the first like 5 episodes of The Prosecutors and was like, and then I went back to listen to the docuseries, and Casey was watching me at some point because I was listening to someone talk about the dog walker, and I was like, God fucking damn it, this again.
No, I can't hear more about the dog.
I don't care about the dog walkers.
I gotta be careful saying this because we have pitched a couple of really like solid S-tier business plans on the podcast. that the people are like, I'm still waiting on, and we're like, we
don't
finally
have
got
time.
Excel spreadsheet girl going. Took us only half a year, maybe
Yeah.
8 months.
We'll
I think
see.
you should write a book called The Final Juror, and it's just your own take on it, you know?
Shut up.
I mean, you're not saying you were the juror. You were just saying, and here's one more, you
and
know?
here's what I think.
Exactly. And there's no law against that.
Business
and you're
manager?
halfway
Grant?
there.
I have 30 pages of notes on Scott Peterson and I think Patty Hearst. I think
I just believe you in every single field of your life you could do. You just casually picked up modeling. So it's like,
it was just for fun. I get free photos.
fuck you. If you'd like to hear more from us, you can find us anywhere on social media where we are Well I Laughed Podcast. We always do listener stories, and so this is our friend or foe theme. So if you have something related to it, send it in. Even if it's a couple of weeks later, we still love hearing your stories,
true.
and they might zombie reemerge a couple episodes later. If you would like to write in to tell us those funny stories, we are wellilaughdpod@gmail.com. And additional content, including things I don't want my mom to hear. Very true. Happens on our Patreon, where we are Well I Laughed Podcast.
Yes.
Thanks for joining
Thanks.
us.
Let us know what you think. I want to know.
Oh yeah, please write in.
I'm dying. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.